there's literally no sound coming from our good friends at C-SPAN, so I'm hoping the sound is, unless there is sound and I'm not hearing it.
I guess we'll know when Congressman Thompson begins to speak.
Yeah. So glad people are joining us today. This looks so funny.
It's going to be a big one here with the former president's attempts to. There we got sound.
You hearing that?
I heard a gavel.
Well done, C-SPAN.
The Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol will be in order.
Doesn't sound good, though.
Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare the committee in recess at any point. Pursuant to House Deposition Authority Regulation 10,
Just reset.
is authorized to declare the committee in recess at any point. Pursuant to House Deposition Authority Regulation 10, the chair announces the committee's approval to release the deposition material presented during today's hearing. Good afternoon. At our last hearing, we told the story of a scheme driven by Donald Trump to pressure former Vice President Mike Pence to illegally overturn the election results. We showed
I don't know
that
why that sound is so
when
bad.
the pressure campaign failed and Mike Pence fulfilled his constitutional obligation, Donald Trump turned a violent mob loose on him. We showed that the mob came within roughly 40 feet of the vice president. Today, we'll show that what happened to Mike Pence wasn't an isolated part of Donald Trump's scheme to overturn the election. In fact, pressuring public servants into betraying their oath was a fundamental part of the playbook. And a handful of election officials in several key states stood between Donald Trump and the upending of American democracy. As we begin today, it's important to remember when we count the votes for president, we count the votes state by state. For the most part, the candidate wins the popular vote in a state wins all the state
Wayfair has everything I need to make my.
and whoever wins a majority of the electoral
Getting a
college
Wayfair ad
votes
there.
wins the
Committee
presidency.
hearings brought to you by
Ridiculous.
Wayfair.
When Donald tried to
wanna try full
overturn
screening
the
it, Doug?
election results,
Yeah, just a
he
minute.
focused on just a few states. He wanted officials at the local and state level to say the vote was tainted by widespread fraud and throw out the results.
You're getting that wobble,
Even
right?
though, as we showed last week, there wasn't any voter
Yes.
fraud that could have overturned the election results. And like Mike Pence, these servants wouldn't go along with Donald Trump's scheme. And when they wouldn't embrace the big lie and substitute the will of the voters with Donald Trump's will to remain in power, Donald Trump worked to ensure they faced the consequences. Threats to people's livelihood and lives. Threats of violence that Donald Trump knew about and amplified. And in our other hearings, we can't just look backward at what happened in late 2020 and in the early 2021 because the danger hadn't gone away. Our democracy endured a mighty test on January 6th and in the days before. We say our institutions held. But what does that really mean? Democratic institutions aren't
Sorry, everybody.
or
I'm having
ideas.
a problem here.
They are local officials who oversee elections, secretaries of state, people in whom we placed our trust that they'll carry out their duties. But what if they don't? 2 weeks ago, New Mexico held its primary elections. One county commission refused to certify the results, citing vague, unsupported claims dealing with Dominion voting machines. The court stepped in, saying New Mexico law required the commission to certify the results. 2 of the 3 members of the commission finally relented. One still refused, saying his vote, quote, isn't based on any evidence, it's not based on any facts, It's only based on my gut feeling and my own intuition, and that's all I need. By the way, a few months ago, this county commissioner was found guilty of illegally entering the Capitol grounds on January 6th. This story reminds us of a few things. First, as we've shown in our previous hearings, claims that widespread voter fraud tainted the 2020 presidential election have always been a lie. Donald Trump knew they were a lie, and he kept amplifying them anyway. Everything we described today, the relentless, destructive pressure campaigns on state officials, was all based on a lie. Donald Trump knew it. He did it anyway. Second, the lie hasn't gone away. It's corrupting our democratic institutions. People who believe that lie are now seeking positions of public trust. And as seen in New Mexico, their oath to be to the people they serve will take a backseat to their commitment to the big lie. If that happens, who will make sure our institutions don't break under the pressure? We won't have close calls. We'll have a catastrophe. My distinguished colleague from California, Mr. Schiff, will present much of the Select Committee's finding on this matter. First, I'm pleased to recognize our Vice Chair, Ms. Cheney,
We're getting both of them.
Wyoming, for any opening statement care to offer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Today, we will begin.
My distinguished colleague from California, Mr. Schiff, will present much of the Select Committee's finding on this matter. First, I'm pleased to recognize our Vice Chair, Ms. Cheney of Wyoming, for any opening statement she'd care to offer.
Legally, we're also simultaneously working to reverse the outcome of the 2020 election at the state level. Each of these efforts to overturn the election is independently serious. Each deserves attention both by Congress and by our Department of Justice. But as the federal court has already indicated, these efforts were also part legally. We're also simultaneously working to reverse the outcome of the 2020 election at the state level. Each of these efforts to overturn the election is independently serious. Each deserves attention both by Congress and by our Department of Justice. But as the federal court has already indicated, these efforts legally, we're also simultaneously working to reverse the outcome of the 2020 election at the state level. Each of these efforts to overturn the election is independently serious. Each deserves attention both by Congress and by our Department of Justice. But as the federal court has already indicated, these efforts were also part of a broader plan. And all of this was done in preparation for January 6th. I would note 2 points for particular focus today. First, today you will hear about calls made by President Trump to officials of Georgia and other states. As you listen to these tapes, keep in mind what Donald Trump already knew at the time he was making those calls. He had been told over and over again that his stolen election allegations were nonsense. For example, this is what former Attorney General Bill Barr said to President Trump about allegations in Georgia.
Just can't get enough of this.
Took a hard look at this ourselves.
Yeah.
And based on
keep
our
it coming.
Review of it, including the interviews of the key witnesses, the Fulton County allegations had no merit. The ballots under the table were legitimate ballots. They weren't in a suitcase. They had been pre-opened for eventually feeding into the machine. All the stuff about the water leak and that there was some subterfuge involved. We felt there was some confusion, but there was no evidence of a subterfuge to create an opportunity to feed things into the count. And so we didn't see any evidence of fraud in the Fulton County episode.
And Acting Deputy Attorney General Richard Donahue told Donald Trump this.
Surprised Barr didn't tell the American people.
Effect of, sir, we've done dozens of investigations, hundreds of interviews. The major allegations are not supported by the evidence developed.
Mr. Trump was told by his own advisors that he had no basis for his stolen election claims, yet he continued to pressure state officials to change the election results. Second, you will hear about a number of threats and efforts to pressure state officials to reverse the election outcome. One of our witnesses today, Gabriel Sterling, explicitly warned President Trump about potential violence on December 1st, 2020, more than a month before January 6th. You will see excerpts from that video repeatedly today.
It has all gone too far. All of it.
Yeah, we thought this was going to be a
gentleman
moment.
today asked for
Turned
Chris
out that it
Krebs,
wasn't.
a patriot who ran CISA, to be shot. A 20-something tech in Gwinnett County today has death threats and a noose put out saying he should be hung for treason because he was transferring a report on batches from an EMS to a county computer so he could read it. It has to stop. Mr. President, you have not condemned these actions or this language. Senators, you have not condemned this language or these actions. This has to stop. We need you to step up, and if you're going to take a position of leadership, show some. My boss, Secretary Raffensperger, his address is out there. They have people doing caravans in front of their house. They've had people come onto their property. It has to stop. This is elections. This is the backbone of democracy, and all of you who have not said a damn word are complicit in this.
That guy was great. Remember that?
The point is this.
It was a good day.
Donald Trump did not care about the threats of violence. He did not condemn them. He made no effort to stop them. He went forward with his fake allegations anyway. One more point. I would urge all of those watching today to focus on the evidence the committee will present. Don't be distracted by politics. This is serious. We cannot let America become a nation of conspiracy theories and thug violence. Finally, I want to thank our witnesses today for all of your service to our country. Today, all of America will hear about the selfless actions of these men and women who acted honorably to uphold the law, protect our freedom, and preserve our Constitution. Today, Mr. Chairman, we will all see an example of what truly makes America great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Without objection, the chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Schiff, for an opening statement.
I just ended up on Adam
Thank you,
Schiff's
Mr. Chairman
email
and
list.
Madam Vice Chair.
Out of the blue.
Congratulations.
On November 3rd,
Started getting
2020,
emails from him.
Donald Trump
Congratulations. Wait to
ran
get him
for
Val
re-election
Demings.
to the office of the presidency, and he lost. His opponent, Joe Biden, finished ahead in the key battleground states of Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and elsewhere. Nevertheless, and for the first time in history, the losing presidential candidate fought to hold on to power. As we have seen in previous hearings, he did so through a variety of means. On Election Day, he sought to stop the counting of the vote, knowing that the millions of absentee ballots elections officials would be counting on Election Day and thereafter would run strongly against him and deliver a victory to Joe Biden. Next, and when he could not stop the counting, he tried to stop state legislatures and governors from certifying the results of the election. He went to court and filed dozens of frivolous lawsuits, making unsubstantiated claims of fraud. When that too failed, he mounted a pressure campaign directed at individual state legislators to try to get them to go back into session and either declare him the winner, decertify Joe Biden as the winner, or send two slates of electors to Congress, one for Biden and one for him, and pressure Vice President Pence to choose him as the winner. But the state legislatures wouldn't go along with this scheme, and neither would the vice president. None of the legislatures agreed to go back into special session and declare him the winner. No legitimate state authority in the states Donald Trump lost would agree to appoint fake Trump electors and send them to Congress.
Not a one.
But this didn't stop the Trump campaign
Kind of makes you wonder
either.
why.
They assembled groups of individuals in key battleground states and got them to call themselves electors, created phony certificates associated with these fake electors, and then transmitted these certificates to Washington and to the Congress to be counted during the joint session of Congress on January 6th.
I mean, just the craziness of all the fake
None of
news
this
he talks about, and he's literally the
But according to Federal
fakiest
District Judge
faker of
David Carter,
Fakeville.
former President Trump and others likely violated multiple federal laws by engaging in this scheme, including conspiracy to defraud the United States. You will hear evidence of the former president and his top advisors' direct involvement in key elements of this plot, or what Judge Carter called a coup in search of a legal theory. For as the judge explained, President Trump's pressure campaign to stop the electoral count did not end with Vice President Pence. It targeted every tier of federal and state elected officials. Convincing state legislatures, he said, to certify competing electors was essential to stop the count and ensure President Trump's reelection. As we have seen in our prior hearings, running through this scheme was a big lie that the election was plagued with massive fraud and somehow stolen. You'll remember what the president's own Attorney General, Bill Barr, said he told the president about these claims of massive fraud affecting the outcome of the election.
You need to say former president every time.
And I told him that the stuff that his people were shoveling out to the public was bullshit. I mean, that the claims of fraud were bullshit.
The president's lie was and is a dangerous cancer on the body politic. If you can convince Americans that they cannot trust their own elections, that any time they lose it is somehow illegitimate, then what is left but violence to determine who should govern? This brings us to the focus of today's hearing. When state elections officials refused to stop the count, Donald Trump and his campaign tried to put pressure on them. When state executive officials refused to certify him the winner of states he lost, he applied more pressure. When state legislators refused to go back into session and appoint Trump electors, he amped up the pressure yet again. Anyone who got in the way of Donald Trump's continued hold on power after he lost the election was the subject of a dangerous and escalating campaign of pressure. This pressure campaign brought angry phone calls and texts, armed protests, intimidation, and all too often, threats of violence and death. State legislators were singled out. So too were statewide elections officials. Even local elections workers, diligently doing their jobs, were accused of being criminals and had their lives turned upside down. As we will show, the president's supporters heard the former president's claims of fraud and the false allegations he made against state and local officials as a call to action.
Stop the steal! Stop the steal! Stop the steal! You're a threat to democracy! You're a threat to free and honest elections!
And then about 45 minutes later, we started to hear the noises outside my home, and my stomach sunk, and I thought, it's me. And then it's just, we don't know what's gonna. I mean, the uncertainty of that was what was the fear. Like, are they coming with guns? Are they gonna attack my house? I'm in here with my kid. I'm trying to put him to bed, and so it was. That was the scariest moment, just not knowing what was going to happen.
This pressure campaign against state and local officials spanned numerous contested states, as you will see in this video produced by the Select Committee.
My name is Josh Roselman. I'm an investigative counsel for the House Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol. Beginning in late November 2020, the president and his lawyers started appearing before state legislators, urging them to give their electoral votes to Trump, even though he lost the popular vote.
I represent President Trump along with Jenna Ellis, and this is our fourth or fifth hearing.
This election has to be turned around because we won Pennsylvania by a lot, and we won all of these swing states by a lot.
This was a strategy with both practical and legal elements. The Select Committee has obtained an email from just 2 days after the election in which a Trump campaign lawyer named Cleta Mitchell asked another Trump lawyer, John Eastman, to write a memo justifying the idea.
When do you remember this coming up as an option in the post-election period for the first time?
Right after the election. It might have been before the election.
Eastman prepared a memo attempting to justify this strategy, which was circulated to the Trump White House, Rudy Giuliani's legal team, and state legislators around the country. And he appeared before the Georgia state legislature to advocate for it publicly.
You could also do what the Florida legislature was prepared to do, which is to adopt a slate of electors yourselves. And when you add in the mix of the significant statistical anomalies and sworn affidavits and video evidence of outright election fraud, I don't think it's just your authority to do that, but quite frankly, I think you have a duty to do that, to protect the integrity of the election here in Georgia.
But Republican officials in several states released public statements recognizing that President Trump's proposal was unlawful. For instance, Georgia Governor Brian Kemp called the proposal unconstitutional, while Arizona House Speaker Rusty Bowers wrote that the idea would undermine the rule of law. The pressure campaign to get state legislators to go along with the scheme intensified when President Trump invited delegations from Michigan and Pennsylvania to the White House.
Either you or Speaker Chatfield, did you make the point to the president that you were not going to do anything that violated Michigan law?
I believe we did. Whether or not it was those exact words or not, but I think that the words that I would have more likely used is we were going to follow the law.
Nevertheless, the pressure continued. The next day, President Trump tweeted, quote, "Hopefully the courts and/or legislatures will have the courage to do what has to be done to maintain the integrity of our elections and the United States of America itself. The world
the
is
investigators
watching."
who are
He posted multiple messages
get to
on
make these
Facebook
videos
listing the contact information.
Makes
for
you
state
wonder how they get
officials
chosen, right?
and urging his supporters to contact them to, quote, "demand
Do they
a
each
vote
get a
on
chance?
decertification." In one of those posts, President Trump disclosed Mike Shirkey's personal phone number to his millions of followers.
Test tapes.
All I remember is receiving over just shy of 4,000 text messages over a short period of time, calling to take action. It was a loud noise, loud, consistent cadence of, we heard that the Trump folks are calling and asking for changes in the electors, and you guys can do this. Well, they were believing things that were untrue.
These efforts also involved targeted outreach to state legislators.
Hi, Representative. My name is Angela McCallum. I'm calling from Trump campaign headquarters in Washington, D.C. You do have the power to reclaim your authority and send a slate of electors that will support President Trump and Vice President Pence.
Incredible. They're
From
so
President Trump's lawyers
stupid. They sent
and
recordings.
Trump himself.
And I've become friendly with legislators that I didn't know 4 weeks ago.
Another legislator, Pennsylvania House Speaker Brian Cutler, received daily voicemails from Trump's lawyers in the last week of November.
Mr. Speaker, this is Rudy Giuliani and Jenna Ellis. We're calling you together because we'd like to discuss, obviously, the election.
Hello, Mr. Speaker. This is Jenna Ellis, and I'm here with Mayor Giuliani.
Hey, Brian, it's Rudy. I really have something important to call to your attention that I think really changes things.
Cutler felt that the outreach was inappropriate and asked his lawyers to tell Rudy Giuliani to stop calling, but Giuliani continued to reach out.
I understand that you don't want to talk to me now. I just want to bring some facts to your attention and talk to you as a fellow Republican.
On December 30th, Trump ally Steve Bannon announced a protest at Cutler's home.
We're getting on the road and we're going down to Cutler. We're going to start going to offices, and if we have to, we're going to go to homes, and we're going to let them know what we think about them.
There were multiple protests. I actually don't remember the exact number. There was at least
3, I think, outside either my district office or my home. And you're correct, my son, my then 15-year-old son, was home by himself for the first one. All of my personal information was doxed online. It was my personal email, my personal cell phone, my home phone number. In fact, we had to disconnect our home phone for about 3 days because it would ring all hours of the night.
You had home phone?
Would fill up with messages.
That's
Brian Cutler, we're outside.
Yeah.
Clerks facing felony charges
shocking.
in Michigan. Poll watchers denied access.
These ads were another element in the effort. The Trump campaign spent millions of dollars running ads online and on television.
The evidence is overwhelming. Call your governor and legislators.
The evidence is
Demand they
overwhelming.
inspect the machines and hear the evidence.
He
Public
lost.
pressure on state officials often grew dangerous in the lead up to January 6th.
Let us in! Let us in! Let us in! Let us in! Special session! Special session! Special session! We'll light the whole shit on fire.
What are we going to do? What can you and I do to a state legislator besides kill him? Although we should not do that. I'm not advising that, but I mean, what else can you do, right?
The punishment for treason is death.
It is.
State pressure campaign and the danger
And you
posed
should be
to
afraid.
state officials and the state capitals around the nation was a dangerous precursor to the violence we saw on January 6th at the U.S. Capitol. Today you will hear from Rusty Bowers, the Republican Speaker of the Arizona House of Representatives. He will tell us about his conversations with the president, with Rudy Giuliani,
How'd that same
and
guy
John
get to be
Eastman,
behind Schiff
and
now?
what the president's team
The
asked
back,
of him,
that guy.
and how his oath of office
He's been in the
would
background
not
of
permit
everybody.
it.
He's like Forrest Gump.
You will then hear from Brad
got a haircut, though,
Raffensperger,
it looks like.
Republican Secretary of State of Georgia.
Let's get him on the
Trump
podcast.
directed to, quote, find 11,780 votes. That did not exist.
You won't even say anything.
Just
We'll
the
just
exact
talk.
number
He'll
of
just
votes
sit there.
needed to overtake Joe Biden. You will also hear from Gabriel Sterling, the chief operating officer, his chief operating officer, about the spurious claims of fraud in the elections in Georgia, and who, responding to a cascading set of threats to his elections team,
I like
warned
this
the
guy.
president to stop, that someone was
Don't say
going
that
to
about a
get
lot of
killed.
Republicans anymore.
And you will hear from Wandrea Shea Moss, a former local elections worker in Fulton County, Georgia, about how all of the lies about the election impacted the lives of real people who administer our elections and still do. You will hear what they experienced when the most powerful man in the world, the President of the United States, sought to cling to power after being voted out of office by the American people. The system held, but barely. And the system held because people of courage, Republicans and Democrats, like the witnesses you will hear today, put their oath to the country and Constitution above any other consideration. They did their jobs, as we must do ours. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
When Shea testifies, she might be the first non-Republican
I now welcome our first panel
person
witness.
to testify.
We're joined today by a distinguished legislator from Arizona, Rusty Bowers, who's a Republican Speaker of the Arizona House of Representatives. Mr. Bowers was first elected to the state legislature in 1993 and has served as Speaker since 2019. Welcome, Speaker Bowers. Brad Raffensperger is the 29th Secretary of State of Georgia, serving in this role since 2019. As an elected official and a Republican, Secretary Raffensperger is responsible for supervising elections
Needs to
in
just go
Georgia
full
and
Roethlisberger and
maintaining
get it
the
over
state's
with.
public records. Welcome, Mr. Secretary. Gabriel Sterling is the Chief
go BR.
Operating Officer in the Georgia Secretary of State's office. Mr. Sterling was the statewide voting systems implementation manager for the 2020 election in Georgia, responsible for leading the Secretary of State's response to the COVID pandemic
Love the background people.
and rolling out modernized voting equipment. I will swear in our witnesses. The witnesses will please stand and raise their right
Well,
hand.
it's fourth time, so I'm going to say it again. This is the important. That's not my pause. I don't know where that pause is coming from.
Affirm on the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
It's a good time. This is an official hearing.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Schiff for questions.
Speaker Bowers, thank you for being with us today. Before we begin with the questions that I had prepared for you, I wanted to ask you about a statement
was this our
that
podcast?
former President Trump issued, which I received just prior to the hearing. Have you had a chance to review that statement?
My counsel called from Arizona and read it to me. Yes, sir.
In that statement, I won't read it in its entirety. Former President Trump begins by calling you a rhino, Republican in name only.
Isn't that all there is to being a Republican or a Democrat, though?
In November 2020, in which he claims that you told him that the election was rigged and that he had won Arizona. To quote the former president, during the conversation, he told me the election was rigged and that I won Arizona, unquote. Did you have such a conversation with the president?
I did have a conversation with the president. That certainly isn't it, but there were parts of it that are true, but there are parts that are not, sir.
And the part that I read you?
Could you elaborate?
Is that false?
Anywhere, anyone, anytime has said that I said the election was rigged, that would not be true.
Did you say he lost?
And when the former president in his statement today claimed that you told him that he won Arizona, is that also false?
That is also false.
Whew. Yeah.
Mr. Bowers, I understand that after the election, and I don't know whether this is the conversation the former president is referring to, but after the election, you received a phone call from President Trump and Rudy Giuliani in which they discussed the result of the presidential election in Arizona. If you would, tell us about that call and whether the former president or Mr. Giuliani raised allegations of election fraud.
Thank you. My wife and I had returned from attending our church meetings. It was on a Sunday. And we were still in the driveway, and I had received a call from a colleague telling me that the White House was trying to get in touch with her and I, and that she
He's
said,
got to be a
please,
Presbyterian.
if you get a call, let's try to take this together. Immediately, I saw that the White House on my Bluetooth was calling, and I took the call and was asked by I would presume the operator at the White House if I would hold for the president, which I did, and Mr. Giuliani came on first, and niceties, then Mr. Trump, President Trump, then President Trump came on, and we initiated a conversation.
During that conversation, did you ask Mr. Giuliani for proof of these allegations of fraud that he was making?
On multiple occasions, yes.
And when you asked him for evidence of this fraud, what did he say?
He said that they did have proof, and I asked him, do you have names? For example, we have 200,000 illegal immigrants, some large number, 5,000 or 6,000 dead people, etc. And I said, do you have their names? Yes. Will you give them to me? Yes. The president interrupted and said, give the man what he needs, Rudy. I said, I will. And that happened on at least 2 occasions, that interchange in the conversation.
So Mr. Giuliani was claiming in the call that there were hundreds of thousands of undocumented people and thousands of dead people who had purportedly voted in the election?
Yes.
And you asked him for evidence of that?
Boy, I like this guy.
And did you ever receive from him that evidence either during the call, after the call, or to this day?
Never.
What was the ask during this call?
Down to business.
He was making these allegations of fraud, but he had
Adam
something or a couple things.
No,
that they
Russell
wanted you to do.
Bowers.
What were those?
Yeah.
The ones I remember were first that we would hold, that I would allow an official committee at the Capitol so that they could hear this evidence and that we could take action thereafter. And I refused. I said, up to that time, the circus, I called it a circus, had been brewing with lots of demonstrations, both at the counting center, at the Capitol, and other places. And I didn't want to have that in the House. I did not feel that the evidence, granted in its absence, merited a hearing, and I didn't want to be used as a pawn if there was some other need that the committee hearing would fulfill.
Did you look it up?
Yeah.
So that was the first
Had
ask,
to
that
dig.
we hold an official committee hearing.
And what was his second ask?
I said, to what end? To what end the hearing? He said, well, we have heard by an official high up in the Republican legislature that there is a legal theory or a legal ability in Arizona that you can remove the electors of President Biden and replace them. And we would like to have the legitimate opportunity through the committee to come to that end and remove that. And I said, that's something that's totally new to me. I've never heard of any such thing. And he pressed that point. And I said, look, you are asking me to do something that is counter to my oath when I swore to the Constitution to uphold it. And I also
Some man
swore
sleeping behind him.
to the Constitution and the laws of the state of Arizona.
He's
and
dropping.
this is totally foreign as an idea or a theory to me.
I'm awake.
And I would never do anything
This
of
guy's great,
such
though.
magnitude without deep consultation with qualified attorneys. And I said, I've got some good attorneys, and I'm going to give you their names. But you're asking me to do something against my oath, and I will not break my oath.
Wow.
And I think that was up to that point.
During the conversation, and
Three
you heard,
cheers.
I think, when we played a snippet of Mr. Giuliani calling other state legislators and saying that he was calling as essentially a fellow Republican, did he make a similar appeal to you or bring up the fact that you shared a similar party?
Whether it was in that call or in a later meeting, he did bring that up more than once.
And how would he bring that up?
He would say,
Hello,
aren't we
Shelley.
all Republicans here? I would think we would get a better reception. I would think you would listen a little more open to my suggestions, that we're all Republicans.
Wow. And this
Party's
evidence
more
that
important
you
than anything else.
asked him for that would justify this
In name
extraordinary
only.
step, I think you said they never produced. Why did you feel, either in the absence of that evidence or with it, what they were asking you to do would violate your oath to the Constitution?
First of all, when the people, and in Arizona, I believe some 40 plus years earlier, the legislature had established the manner of electing our officials, or the electors for the presidential race. Once it was given to the people, as in Bush v. Gore, illustrated by the Supreme Court, it becomes a fundamental right of the people. So as far as I was concerned, for someone to ask me in the, I would call it a paucity, there was no evidence being presented of any strength. Evidence can be hearsay evidence, it's still evidence, but it's still hearsay. But strong judicial quality evidence, anything that would say to me, you have a doubt, deny your oath. I will not do that. And on more than one occasion throughout all this, that has been brought up.
Is he getting
And
emotional?
it is a tenet of my faith.
Wow.
That the Constitution is divinely inspired.
Oh.
Of my most basic foundational beliefs. And so for me to do that because somebody just asked me to is foreign to my very being. I will not do it.
Just can't get a win when you need one.
During that conversation, Speaker Bowers, did you ask him if what he was proposing had ever been done before?
I did.
And what did he say?
He said, well, I'm not familiar with Arizona law or any other laws, but I don't think so. And that also was brought up in other conversations, both with him and with John Eastman and others.
Speaker Bowers, I understand that a week after that
I'm
call,
familiar
Mr.
with your
Giuliani appeared with
ways
others associated
in
with
Arizona.
President Trump's effort to overturn the result of the election at a purported legislative hearing in a hotel ballroom in Phoenix. Was this an official hearing of the state legislature?
It was not.
And why was it not a real or official hearing of the legislature?
A legislator can hold a group meeting. You can call it a hearing. But when they ask me to have an official hearing, we establish it by protocols, public notice, etc. It's typically held at the Capitol, but doesn't need to be. We can authorize a hearing off campus. And in this case, I had been asked on several occasions to allow a hearing. I had denied it, but said, you're free to hold a meeting, any meeting you want, to the person who asked, and which he ultimately did. I think he was a little frustrated, but he ultimately did.
This meeting was the same day, I believe, that the governor of Arizona, Doug Ducey, certified Biden as the winner of the presidential election in Arizona. Did you meet with Mr. Giuliani and his associates while they were in Phoenix sometime after that purported legislative hearing at the hotel?
Yes, I did, sir.
And at that meeting, did Mr. Giuliani raise any specific allegations of election fraud again?
His initial comments were, again, the litany of groups of illegal individuals or people deceased, etc. And he had brought that up, and I wasn't alone in that meeting. There were others, and other members of the Senate aggressively questioned him. And then I proceeded to question him on the proof that he was going to bring me, etc. But he did bring those up, yes.
And these other legislators were also Republican members of the Senate?
They were,
this
yes,
angle, because it looks like I'm watching.
And did they also press him for proof of these allegations?
They pressed him very strongly. Two of them especially, very strongly.
And at some point, did Mr. Giuliani ask one of the other attorneys on his team to help him out with the evidence?
He did. He asked Jenna Ellis, who was sitting to his right. One thing was that it was more to the point of, was there sufficient evidence or action that we could justify the recalling of the electors. But at that part of the conversation, I know he referred to someone else. But he did ask, do we have the proof, to Jenna, Miss Ellis? And she said, yes. And I said, I want the names. Do you have the names? Yes. Do you have how they voted? We have all the information. I said, can you get to me that information? Did you bring it with you? Which was repeated in different iterations for some period of time.
At some point, did one of them make a comment that they didn't have evidence, but they had a lot of theories?
That was Mr. Giuliani.
And what exactly did he say, and how did that come up?
My recollection, he said, we've got lots of theories, we just don't have the evidence. And I don't know if that was a gaffe, or maybe he didn't think through what he said, but both myself and others in my group, the three in my group and my council, both remembered that specifically, and afterwards we kind of laughed about it.
He could get the shine off the top of his head.
Getting back to the ask in that phone call that preceded this meeting, he wanted you to have the legislature dismiss the Biden electors and replace them with Trump electors on the basis of these theories of fraud?
He did not say it in those exact words, but he did say that Arizona law, according to what he understood, that would be allowed, and that we needed to come into session to take care of that, which initiated a discussion about, again, what I can legally and not legally do, and I can't go into session in Arizona unilaterally or on my sole prerogative.
In this meeting or at any other later time, did anyone provide you with evidence of election fraud sufficient to affect the outcome of the presidential election in Arizona?
No one provided me ever such evidence.
The Select Committee has uncovered evidence in the course of our investigation that had stopped the steal protests at state capitals across the country. There were individuals with ties to the groups or parties involved in the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. One of those incursions took place in the Arizona House of Representatives building, as you can see in this footage. This is previously undisclosed video of protesters illegally entering and refusing to leave the building. One of the individuals prominently shown in this video is Jacob Chansley. Perhaps better known as the QAnon shaman, this rioter entered the Capitol on January 6th, was photographed leaving a threatening note on the dais in the U.S. Senate chamber, and was ultimately sentenced to 41 months in prison after pleading guilty to obstruction of an official proceeding. Other protesters who occupied the Arizona House of Representatives building included Proud Boys, while men armed with rifles stood just outside the entrance. I understand these protesters were calling for you by name, Speaker Bowers. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Speaker Bowers, did the president call you again in later in December?
He did, sir.
Did you tell the president in that second call that you supported him, that you voted for him, but that you were not going to do anything illegal for him?
I did, sir.
Nevertheless, his lawyer, John Eastman, called you some days later on June 4th, 2021. And he did have a very specific ask that would have required you to do just what you had already told the president you wouldn't do, something that would violate your oath. Is that correct?
That's correct. It wasn't just me. I had my counsel and others on the call.
And what did Dr. Eastman want you to do?
That we would, in fact, take a vote to overthrow, or I shouldn't say overthrow, that we would decertify the electors, and that because we had plenary authority to do so. And he cited Article 2, Section 1, I think it's Clause 2, and said that in his opinion that gave us the authority if there was, I don't recall him saying sufficient evidence, but there was some call or some strong reason to do so or justification to do so that we could do that. And that he was asking that his suggestion was that we would do it. And I said, again,
we ain't doing it.
I took an oath. For me to take that, to do what you do, would be counter to my oath. I don't recall if it was in that conversation, clearly, that we talked more about the oath, but I said, what would you have me do? And he said, just do it and let the court sort it out.
Yeah.
And I said, you're asking me
Kill them all and let God
to do something that's never been done in history, the history of the United States, and I'm going to put my state through that without sufficient proof, and that's going to be good enough with me? That I would put us through that, my state, that I swore to uphold both in Constitution and in law?
Yeah, he'd be glad for you to do that, actually.
No, sir. He said, well, that's my suggestion would be just do it and let the courts figure it all out. And he didn't use that exact phrase, but that was what his meaning was, and I declined, and I believe that was close to the end of our phone call.
And again, this took place after you had recently spoken with President Trump and told him that you wouldn't do anything illegal for him. Is that right?
It wasn't days after. Obviously, it was days after, but a few days had gone by.
But you had told President Trump you would not do anything illegal for him.
I did, both times.
And you told Dr. Eastman that you did not believe there was legal support to justify what he was asking, but he still wanted you to do it and effectively let the courts work it out?
I've been warned, don't say things you think, maybe he said, but I do remember him saying that the authority of the legislature was plenary and that you can do it. I said, then you should know that I can't even call the legislature into session without a 2/3 majority vote. We're only 30 plus 1. There's no way that could happen.
But in your view, what he was asking you to do would have violated your oath to the Constitution?
I'm guessing the answer to that question is yes.
We're only 30 plus 1.
I'm going to rewind it so you can just hear that again.
There's no way that could happen.
I'm not
But in your
doing
view,
that on its
what
own.
he was asking you to do would have violated your oath to the Constitution of Arizona on the morning of January 6th.
I did.
And what did Mr. Biggs ask you to do?
Mr. Biggs.
I believe that was the day that the vote was occurring.
Great name, Mr. Biggs.
Sex in the City?
And Mr. Hard,
Have certification,
Mr. Shoulder.
Or to declare the certification of the electors.
Call him Mr. Biggs.
And he asked if I would sign on both to a letter that had been sent from my state and or that I would support the decertification of the electors. And I said I would not.
Mr. Speaker, on December 4th, 2020, shortly after your meeting with Rudy Giuliani and other allies of President Trump, you released a statement publicly addressing, quote, calls for the legislature to overturn the 2020 certified election results. The statement is very straightforward in explaining the, quote, breathtaking request, unquote, made by representatives of President Trump. Quote, that the Arizona legislature overturn the certified results of last month's election and deliver the state's electoral college votes to President Trump, unquote.
Incredible.
Why did you believe, as you wrote in this statement, that the rule of law forbid you from doing what President Trump and his allies wanted you to do?
Representative, I'm sorry, I should be saying, Mr. Chairman, Representative Schiff, there's two sides to the answer.
Well, if you
One
took
is,
9 seconds to
what am
think
I
about
allowed
the
to
answer,
do?
He is by the
And
book.
what am I forbidden to do? We have no legal pathway, both in state law nor to my knowledge in federal law, for us to execute such a request. And I am not allowed to walk or act beyond my authority. If I'm not specifically authorized as a legislator, as a legislature, then I cannot act to the point of calling us into session. Some say that just a few legislators have plenary authority.
You'll put us over here in the gallery.
As part of all of this discussion, I'll call it.
Corey's comment that
to not
this is
have
the
authority and
right-wing
be
political
forbidden
theory
to
of
act
change
beyond
is
my
absolutely
authority
right.
on both counts.
Just do
I
it,
am not
and if the
authorized
courts
to
let
take
you
such
get away
action,
with it,
and
then
that
it
would
was
deny
okay.
my oath.
In your statement, you included
be illegal
excerpts
if
from
the president
President Ronald
does it.
Reagan's inaugural address in 1981. The newly inaugurated president told the country, quote, the orderly transfer of authority as called for in the Constitution routinely takes place as it has for almost 2 centuries, and few of us stop to think how unique we really are. In the eyes of many in the world, this every 4-year ceremony we accept as normal is nothing less than a miracle. Tell us, if you would, Mr. Speaker, why did you include President Reagan's words in your public statement?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Schiff, because I have a lot of admiration for Ronald Reagan. I've had the opportunity of going through his home with one other person and walking through and
Sneaking around in the guy's house?
Not recently,
I have
hopefully.
a lot of admiration for him.
But snuck around in my house doesn't have admiration.
When he
I love this guy, though. I'm all
pointed
for
out,
him.
which is,
I mean, not
I've
his
lived
politics.
in other country,
not his
for a period of time,
view of the
and have
divine
visited
inspiration of the
a few
Constitution.
countries. And during election times, the fact that we allow an election, support an election, and stand behind the election, even in the past when there have been serious questions about the election, and then move on
.org.
without disturbance
Yeah.
and with acceptance that we choose to follow the outcome of the will of the people.
Oh, caught it.
That will means a lot to me, and I know it meant a lot to him. And so we included that.
Just a judge-like pause here. That's all that's going on.
Yep.
Thank you, Speaker Bowers. I now want to look even more deeply at the fake electors scheme. Every 4 years, citizens from all over the United States go to the polls to elect their president. Under our Constitution, when we cast our votes for president, we are actually voting to send electors pledged to our preferred candidate to the Electoral College. In December, the electors in each state meet, cast their votes, and send those votes to Washington. There is only one legitimate slate of electors from each state.
But imagine if he didn't have the Electoral College system.
Congress meets in a joint session to count those votes, and the winner of the Electoral College vote becomes the president. In this next segment, you'll hear how President Trump and his campaign were directly involved in advancing and coordinating the plot to replace legitimate Biden electors with fake electors not chosen by the voters. You'll hear how this campaign convinced these fake electors to cast and submit their votes through fake certificates, telling them that their votes would only be used in the event that President Trump won his legal challenges. Yet when the president lost those legal challenges, when courts rejected them as frivolous and without merit, the fake elector scheme continued. At this point, President Trump's own lawyers, so-called Team Normal, walked away rather than participate in the plan. And his own White House counsel's office said that the plan was not legally sound.
Don't forget, Team Normal voted for Trump. These are not normal people.
My name is Casey Lucier. I'm an investigative counsel for the House Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol. On November 18th, a lawyer working with the Trump campaign named Kenneth Cheesebro wrote a memo arguing that the Trump campaign should organize its own electors in the swing states that President Trump had lost. The Select Committee received testimony that those close to President Trump began planning to organize fake electors for Trump in states that Biden won in the weeks after the election.
Who do you remember being involved in those early discussions around the Thanksgiving time regarding having alternate electors meet?
Mr. Giuliani, several of Mr. Giuliani's associates, Mr. Meadows, members of Congress, although it's difficult to distinguish if the members I'm thinking of were involved during Thanksgiving or if they were involved as we progressed through December.
At the president's direct request, the RNC assisted the campaign in coordinating this effort.
What did the president say when he called you?
Essentially, he turned the call over to Mr. Eastman, who then proceeded to
Mitt Romney's niece.
talk about the importance of the RNC helping the campaign gather these contingent electors in case any of the legal challenges that were ongoing changed the result of any of the states. I think more just helping them reach out and assemble them. But my understanding is the campaign did take the lead, and we just were helping them in that role.
As President
Because
Trump
the
and his
RNC
supporters
does not
continued to
exist
lose
separate
lawsuits,
from
some campaign
Trump
lawyers
campaign.
became convinced that convening electors in states that Trump lost
Because
was
they
no
turned it all
longer
over to him.
appropriate.
I just remember I either replied or called somebody saying, unless we have litigation pending that's like in these states, like I don't think this is appropriate, or this isn't the right thing to do. I don't remember how I phrased it, but and I got into a little bit of a back and forth.
Is he laying on the ground with planters behind his head?
Where I said, all right, you just get after it. Like I'm out.
At that point, I had Josh Finley email Mr. Chesbro politely to say, this is your task. You are responsible for the Electoral College issues moving forward. And this was my way of taking that responsibility to
Hands off.
The committee learned the White House counsel's office also felt the plan was potentially illegal.
And so to be clear, did you hear the White House counsel's office say that this plan to have alternate electors meet and cast votes for Donald Trump in states that he had lost was not legally sound?
Yes, sir.
And who was present for that meeting that you remember?
It was in our office. It was Mr. Meadows, Mr. Giuliani, and a few of Mr. Giuliani's associates.
The Select Committee interviewed several of the individual fake electors,
can't even say their
as well
names.
as Trump campaign staff who helped organize the effort.
We were just, kind of useful idiots or rubes at that point. A strong part of me really feels that it's just kind of as the road continued and as it was failure, that got formulated as what do we have on the table. Let's just do it.
Totally.
And
it was the administration.
Now,
Just
after what
one
we've told you today
failure
about
after
the Select
another.
Committee's investigation about the conclusion of the professional lawyers on the campaign staff, Justin Clark, Matt Morgan, and Josh Finley,
on
about
her
their
Apple Watch.
unwillingness to participate in the
I spend too much
convening of
time
these
looking at people's
electors.
bans on their Apple
How
Watches.
does that
I'm with you.
contribute
It's
to your
just
understanding of these issues?
I like them. I don't like them.
Angry. I'm angry because
This is serious, though.
I think, in a sense, no one really cared if people were potentially putting themselves in jeopardy.
Would you have not wanted to participate in this any further as well?
I absolutely would not have, had I known that the three main lawyers for the campaign that I've spoken to in the past and were leading up were not on board. Yeah.
I was told that
Did you
these
ask?
would only count if a court ruled in our favor. So that would have been using our electors, it would have been using our electors in ways that we weren't told about, and we wouldn't have supported.
This is an
Documents obtained by the
interesting
Select
argument.
Committee indicate that instructions were given to the electors in several states that they needed to cast their ballots in complete secrecy. Because this scheme involved fake electors, those participating in certain states had no way to comply with state election laws, like where the electors were supposed to meet. One group of fake electors even considered hiding overnight to ensure that they could access the state capitol, as required in Michigan.
Did Mr. Norton say
Imagine that in
who
your
he was
LinkedIn
working
bio.
with at all on this effort to have electors meet?
He said he was working with the president's campaign. He told me that the Michigan Republican electors were planning to meet in the Capitol and hide overnight so that they could fulfill the role of casting their vote per law in the Michigan chambers. And I told him in no uncertain terms that that was insane and inappropriate.
In one state,
You mean they're
the
going
fake
to
electors
illegally
even
occupy a
asked for
Capitol
promise
building?
that the campaign would pay their legal fees.
couldn't
Michigan,
imagine such a
Pennsylvania, New Mexico, Nevada, and Wisconsin. At the request of the Trump campaign, the electors from these battleground states signed documents falsely asserting that they were the, quote, duly elected electors from their state, and submitted them to the National Archives and to Vice President Pence in his
It's like a
capacity
note
as
from your
President of the
parents,
Senate. Here is
you know,
what
that
some
it
of
was
the
okay
fake
for you to
elector
not be in
certificates
school.
look like as compared to the real ones. But these ballots had no legal effect. In an email produced to the Select Committee, Dr. Eastman told a Trump campaign representative that it did not matter that the electors had not been approved by a state authority. Quote, the fact that we have multiple slates of electors demonstrates the uncertainty of either. That should be enough.
No,
he
it
urged
doesn't.
that Pence act boldly and be challenged. Documents produced to the Select Committee
He's
show
such
that
a
the
bad
Trump
lawyer.
campaign took steps to ensure that the physical copies of the fake
we need to
electors'
know who these
electoral
electors
votes
are.
from 2 states were
Who are
delivered to
these
Washington for January 6th. Text messages exchanged between Republican Party officials in Wisconsin show that on January 4th, the Trump campaign asked for someone to fly their fake electors' documents to Washington. A staffer for Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson texted a staffer for Vice President Pence just minutes before
do
the
it.
beginning of the joint session.
Ron will
The
do
staffer
it.
stated that Senator Johnson wished to hand deliver to the Vice President the fake electors' votes from Michigan and Wisconsin. The Vice President's aide unambiguously instructed them not to
Wow.
deliver the fake votes to the Vice President. Even though the fake elector slates were transmitted to Congress
Wow.
and the executive branch, the Vice President held firm in his position that his role was to count lawfully
is knock
submitted
your hat
electoral
off.
votes.
Joseph R. Biden Jr. of the state of Delaware has received 306 votes. Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida has received 232 votes.
Which is what he did when the
What
joint
a
session
stomping.
resumed on January 6th after the attack on the Capitol.
That was a big deal. Ron Johnson said, aide said, give
What we
something
just
to Mike
heard
Pence.
in that video was
and
an
his
aide to the
aide
White
said,
House chief of
don't.
staff, telling this committee that the White House counsel's office felt that this
Also
fake
used the word
electors
sup.
plan was not legally sound. Nevertheless, the Trump campaign went forward with
Sup,
the scheme anyway. Speaker Bowers, were you aware that fake electors had met in Phoenix on December 14th and purported to cast electoral votes for President Trump?
I was not.
When you learned that these electors had met and sent their electoral votes to Washington, what did you
Schiff
think?
looks like he's about to just laugh at all of this.
Well, I thought of the book, The Gang That Couldn't Shoot Straight. And I just thought, this is a tragedy.
That's the nastiest Russell Bowers has ever been in
Bowers, I understand
a public
that as you flew from
space.
Phoenix to Washington yesterday,
He's never said
you
anything quite
reflected
so
upon
cruel.
some passages from a personal journal that you were keeping in December 2020 while all of this was taking place. With your permission, I'm wondering if you would be willing to share one passage in particular with us.
Or a section on your tour of Ronald Reagan's house.
Thank you very much.
Dear diary.
The Big Gipper.
It is painful to have friends who have been such a help to me turn on me with such rancor.
Welcome to the Republican Party.
I may, in the eyes of men, not hold correct opinions or act according to their vision or convictions.
No, you do. Here's two men right
But
here.
I do not take this
with
current
eyes.
situation in a light manner, a fearful manner,
I'm with you.
or a vengeful manner. I do not want to be a winner by cheating. I will not play with laws I swore allegiance to with any contrived desire towards deflection of my deep foundational desire to follow God's will as I believe He led my conscience to embrace.
Put it on the shelf.
How else will I ever approach Him in the wilderness of life, knowing that I ask this guidance only to show myself a coward?
Wow. Wow.
In defending the course He let me take. He led me to take.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Those are powerful words.
Wow.
I understand that taking the courageous positions that you did following the 2020 election in defense of the rule of law and protecting the voters of Arizona resulted in you and your family being subjected to protests and terrible threats. Can you tell us how this impacted you and your family?
Well, as others in the videos have mentioned, we received, my secretaries would say, in excess of 20,000 emails and
secretaries,
tens of thousands of voicemails and
maybe it's
texts,
like Secretary of the Ministry,
saturated our offices.
Interior.
And we were unable to work, or at least communicate. But at home,
probably doesn't mean administrative assistants, right?
Up till even recently, it is the new pattern or a pattern in our lives to worry what will happen on Saturdays, because we have various groups come by and they have had video panel trucks with videos of me proclaiming me to be a pedophile and a pervert and a corrupt and politician, and blaring loudspeakers in my neighborhood.
Simply the worst.
And
these people
leaving literature both on my property, but arguing and threatening with neighbors and with myself. I don't know if I should name groups, but there was one gentleman that had the 3 bars on his chest, and he had a pistol and was threatening my neighbor, not with the pistol, but just vocally. When I saw the gun, I knew I had to get close.
Because he's a good guy.
And at the same time, on some of these, we had a daughter who was gravely ill.
Oh.
COVID?
Who was upset by what was happening outside. And my wife, that was a valiant person, very, very strong, quiet, very strong woman. So it was disturbing.
I should say.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you for your service to the state of Arizona and to the country. Mr. Chairman, at this point, I think it'd be appropriate to take a short recess.
That's not your decision.
I was just going to say, oh, you want to be the chairman too?
The chair requests that those in the hearing room remain seated until the Capitol Police have escorted members and witnesses from the room. We'll have.
All right.
All right, let me get this on mute.
Yeah. We got your Wikipedia page up there.
I can see that. I can see that. You know whose Wikipedia page it is, though? Russell Bauer's Wikipedia page, my friend.
Checking out, a little bit more about Rusty. So that was some pretty powerful stuff.
Powerful stuff there.
Some of the things that we learned throughout this first session of the section of the hearings was this whole coordinated plot to have fake electors, that these fake electors went so far as to gather together and cast votes, and then there are different members of the committee going to shake hands with Rusty after his testimony, and then producing documents, forging official documents.
Incredible.
And trying to deliver those through elected officials to the vice president.
Unbelievable.
Ron Johnson, who is up for re-election and frankly, is being challenged for a seat as a Wisconsin senator, and would love to see him
and our ire will be upon him.
Yes, particularly would love to see him defeated by Tom Nelson, one of our candidates for Common Good.
Yeah.
But that is, so this isn't just like, oh goodness, this isn't, you remember okay, so when I was in high school,
which is when did you graduate from the high school?
One summer, I graduated in 92.
Okay.
One summer I attended Teenage Republican School.
Oh.
It was a week-long camp at Siena College, and
an entire camp. Did they have sessions on shootings, or
Well, this was
archery?
back in the day.
Did they have one on fake electors? Did they have a whole little session on how to put together fake electors?
So we worked on different issues, crafted bills that were then, we elected legislative leaders, and we went through this whole process of learning what, how all of this works, and actually debating things and figuring it out. And it was a little bit like, I don't know, I would imagine space camp would be like. Not actually going into space, you're just kind of simulating it.
Yeah, sure.
These electors are they're at camp. They're at politics camp. They're just faking it. They're just simulating it. They're getting together and LARPing.
That's a good one. Yeah.
They are cosplaying the Electoral College. This is no different than my kids playing Dungeons and Dragons, and these fake. Can you imagine? Can you just picture the seriousness that they must have had sitting around in a room? Okay, let's cast our ballots now, and it's signing their names like they're pretending to be John Hancock at the at the Congressional or the Continental Congress. Listen, these people are absolutely ridiculous.
Totally ridiculous.
Devoid of reality, and
well, and I'll tell you, Rob, the other thing I think
I am worked up at the thought of these political LARPers, these fake electors, these ridiculous stooges.
Yeah, look, and so was former sculptor and water painter Russell Bowers, which is also true.
I like to call him Rusty.
Rusty Bowers. Look, the idea which came out in one of the staffers, little voiceovers, was that the states who put together these fake electors we're told these are just a standby, these are just a proxy in case our case goes before a judge and the judge rules the way we think the judge is going to rule. But look, there's nothing to this yet. This is just there. And then to find out that what the administration and the campaign are doing with those is something that they didn't think they were doing, to now hear even the fake electors who offered themselves as fake electors are as upset as you are, because they're saying that is not what I put my name on that fake document for. You told me it was in case we needed it by, for some legal purposes, and now come to find out you're using it for all manner of things that have nothing to do with what I thought it was. These scoundrels are such liars, cheaters, and grifters. They're truly even lying and cheating to the very people who are trying to work with them.
Yes.
It's really quite
no
stunning.
bounds.
There is just nothing these Trump fake elector, fake stop the Steelers won't do.
What we have learned is that the Trump administration and their loyal hacks are willing to use their supporters, manipulate them, and use them. They did that with bilking $250 million out of them over this ridiculous and, speaking of fake fund of of legal defense for the president, the former president. And now we find they are willing to use people who are willing to put their name on this.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, Doug, you have these things where, like, you sit around and, like, sometimes old men will be sitting around like, oh, you're solving the problems of the world, because you just sit around and you talk about, like,
I have no idea what you could be referring to, but I will use my imagination for a bit.
Sometimes, I'm sitting in the cigar shop and somebody will come in, oh, what are you guys, oh, we're solving the problems of the world. It's just, it's like, people sitting around having conversations like what ifs, and I think it should happen like this, and it's all just speculation.
I know people that do that by watching TV together.
Yeah, or by listening to our podcast.
Like we're doing right now.
We do that with our podcast. But, I mean, can you imagine ending one of those conversations by signing a document and pretending like it's some kind of legal thing?
And then being told, hey, I just need your signature on here just for this, just in case. And then someone's like, look, I've got proof that there's other electors, because all we need to do is put electors together. This is the other thing that Eastman said. It doesn't matter if these are real electors. It doesn't even matter if they're certified by anybody. As long as we can say we have them, that creates enough of a problem that they can't certify the others. That logic, that theory, that the thing that replaces official documents is that you have an unofficial document. Just imagine for a minute that becomes the rules of courts. Can you imagine if a court were to say, well, hang on, does anybody else print something up in Word and then get a bunch of other people in secret to sign it? Because that could be different than the certification that we need for this. That is just totally bonkers. Like, the more you get into this, the more you're just total hats off, whoop.
I'm wondering, I need to go check and see if there is a electoral college template in Canva to be able to use when you are creating your own electoral college slate of delegates. What? These people.
And we think coming soon in the. We think coming soon in our hearing is going to be when 11,780 becomes the number of Trump's demise, and at 11,780, we're hoping, starting a campaign right here, trademark Rob Ryersey, NFT owned Rob Ryersey right now, that his prison number becomes 11,780. Just it's like getting a custom license plate. Yeah. But that Trump would be able to get a prisoner number. A custom inmate number.
Listen. The guy in the back there that fell asleep, does he have a Star Trek pin on?
Oh,
Look at his lapel.
You see him right now?
Yeah, he just sat down. Yeah, as he was walking in. See if they
Oh,
show him. Watch for this. I think
must
he's
be
wearing
looking
a
at something
Star
else.
Trek pin on his lapel.
Oh
The
my
guy who
gosh!
fell
Please say
asleep
it so.
earlier.
Please say it is so.
Yeah.
I saw Stephanie Rule wearing a pin last night that was different. It was a love pin, and it was written in like a V. Maybe it's for Ukraine. No, I don't know either. I just to get nervous that I'm supposed to wear one of those things. All right. Well. Oh boy, the idea that you'd get a custom
because I have gotten myself worked up here during this break.
a custom inmate number for Trump. That is just one of the great notions of like a vanity plate. He gets a vanity number. I just gotta. Again, I don't think he's going to go to jail. I don't think we can have our presidents with an inmate number. I think it would just. So I don't know what we do. I don't know where the place is that we land in a democracy where you can't let the person get away with what he did, and you can't have him going to prison.
Well, I mean, is what happened with Richard Nixon? Is that the thing where
that's the thing?
You get pardoned and then you live. You go away and live in disgrace. Trump's not going to do that. Like, listen, I'm about to say a sentence I never imagined I would say.
Please
he doesn't have the decency of Richard Nixon.
He doesn't have the decency of Richard Nixon. I knew Richard. Yeah, it's like Roger Stone will come in and say, "Sir,
I knew Richard Nixon.
I worked for Richard Nixon.
was a friend of mine. You, sir, are no Richard Nixon.
You, sir, are no Richard Nixon." Well, and because he would have to admit to the guilt that is 100% his, in order to get a pardon. So that's gonna slow things up. I'm trying to turn the volume back on, but I've lost my cursor. You just have no idea how many things I have to do around here to bootleg a news programming from YouTube to be able to put it on YouTube.
Yeah.
All right.
For anybody that hasn't seen, just to give you something else to worry about in the world, the Supreme Court basically has ended the separation of church and state today. So there's that.
Yeah, I hope it doesn't. I hope it doesn't go that far. But yeah, that ruling that state money can be used for church schools. Yep. Boy, I thought Russell Bowers, watercolor painter, and head of the Republican Party in the Senate or in the House in Arizona, did a great job. I felt him to be an honorable man. But the line, I fundamentally believe the Constitution was divinely inspired. That just literally caused me to bend over.
Well, that's a common Mormon view.
Mm-hmm.
It's held by Evan McMichael.
Evan McMillan?
Evan McMillan, sorry.
And probably Evan McMichael. I'm sure Evan McMichael.
I was texting about him the other day to a friend of mine and called him Evan McMichael in the text too.
Really?
And he replied, McMullen? I have some kind of mental block but he believes that the Constitution.
You gonna take a McMulligan?
Yeah, I wonder if Mitt Romney believes that. That would be a
good point. Good point.
Ask,
Yeah.
That is that's a thing.
It's a thing.
Exists.
It's a thing, and it's not only a thing with the it's not only Mormons. Let me just be clear. It's not only Mormons.
Yeah, but Mormons are it's a part of their theological system.
Yeah, right. It's one of their documents. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a part of the theological system of other denominational groups or faith traditions, though it is, I think, on a personal kind of folk theology level is held by many people.
And I'm not an apologist for the Mormons. I dated one briefly in high school. I have a lot of Mormon friends. That's as in as I am. They use divinely inspired differently in their tradition than the other people do. So the words don't always mean what we think the words mean.
Which, by the way, check out the docuseries on Netflix called The
committee
Keep
will be
Sweet
in order.
about the fundamentalist Latter-day
President
Saints.
Trump's pressure campaign against state officials existed in all
I'm
the
going to
key
go grab a
battleground
coffee.
states that he lost.
Me too.
But the former
Oh,
president
I'm just going to
had
go to a full screen
particular
then. We'll be back.
obsession with Georgia. Here is the president
Nope, here we
on
are.
the afternoon of January 6th, after his
It's
own.
worse.
You are about to hear are patently false.
But I will be
should
listening.
find those votes. They should absolutely find that. Just over 11,000 votes, that's all we need. They defrauded us out of a win in Georgia, and we're not going to forget it.
So the state of Georgia is where we will turn our attention to next. I want to emphasize that our investigation into these issues is still ongoing. As I stated in our last hearing, if you have relevant information or documentary evidence to share with the Select Committee, we welcome your cooperation. But we will share some of our findings with you today. Secretary Raffensperger, thank you for being here today. You've been a public servant in Georgia since 2015, serving first as a member of the Georgia House of Representatives, and then, since January 2019, as Georgia's Secretary of State. As a self-described conservative Republican, is it fair to say that you wanted President Trump to win the 2020 election?
Yes, it is.
Mr. Secretary, many witnesses have told the Select Committee that Election Day, November 3rd, 2020, was a largely uneventful day in their home states. In spite of the challenges of conducting an election during a pandemic, you wrote in the Washington Post that the election was, quote, successful. Tell us, what was your impression of how Election Day had proceeded in Georgia?
On Election Day in November, our election went remarkably smooth. In fact, we meet at the GEMA headquarters. That's the Georgia Energy Emergency Management Association meeting location, but we were following wait times in line. In the afternoon, our average wait time was 3 minutes statewide that we were recording for various precincts, and it actually got down to 2 minutes. And at the end of the day, we felt that we had a successful election from the standpoint of the administration and the operation of the election.
Thank you. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Schiff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Raffensperger, did Joe Biden win the 2020 presidential election in Georgia, and by what margin?
President Biden carried the state of Georgia by approximately 12,000 votes.
And Mr. Secretary, as I understand it, your office took several steps to ensure the accuracy of the vote count in Georgia, reviewing the vote count in at least 3 different ways. These steps included a machine recount, a forensic audit, and a full hand recount of every one of the 5 million ballots cast. Did these efforts, including a recount of literally every ballot cast in the state of Georgia, confirm the result?
Yes, they did. We counted the ballots where the first tabulation would be scanned. Then when we did our 100% hand audit of the all 5 million ballots in the state of Georgia, all cast in place, all absentee ballots, they were all hand recounted, and they came remarkably close to the first count. And then upon the election being certified, President Trump, because he was within 0.5%, could ask for a recount. And then we recounted them again through the scanners, and we got remarkably the same count. 3 counts, all remarkably close, which showed that President Trump did come up short.
Nevertheless, as you will see, the president and his allies began making numerous false allegations of voter fraud, false allegations that you and Mr. Sterling, among others, had to address. Mr. Sterling, thank you also for being here today. Following the 2020 election, in addition to your normal duties, I understand that you became a spokesperson to try to combat disinformation about the election and the danger it was creating for elections officials, among others. In a December 1 press conference, you addressed some of your remarks directly to President Trump. Let's take a look at what you said that day.
Mr. President, it looks like you likely lost the state of Georgia. We're investigating. There's always a possibility. I get it. And you have the rights to go to the courts. What you don't have the ability to do, and you need to step up and say this, is stop inspiring people to commit potential acts of violence. Someone's going to get hurt, someone's going to get shot, someone's going to get killed. And it's not right. It's not right.
Mr. Sterling, what prompted you to make these remarks?
Mr. Schiff, we had a previously scheduled press conference that day, as we were in the habit of doing, trying to be as transparent as we could about the election and the counts going on. A little after lunch that day, lunchtime, I received a call from the project manager from Dominion Voting Systems, who was oddly, audibly shaken. She's not the kind of person I would assume would be that way. She has a master's from MIT, a graduate of the Naval Academy, and was very much on the ball and pretty unflappable. And she informed me about a young contractor they had who had been receiving threats from a video had been posted by some QAnon supporters. And at that point, we had been been steeping in this kind of stuff. So it was around us all the time, so I didn't take note of it more than adding to the pile of other stuff we were having to deal with. And I did pull up Twitter, and I scrolled through it, and I saw the young man's name. It was a particular tweet that, for lack of a better word, was a straw that broke the camel's back. Had the young man's name. It was a very unique name. I believe it was a first-generation American. And it said, had his name, "You committed treason. May God have mercy on your soul," with a slowly twisting gif of a noose. And for lack of a better word, I lost it. I just got irate. My boss was with me at the time, the Deputy Secretary, Jordan Fuchs, and she could tell that I was angry. I tend to turn red from here up when that happens, and that happened at that time. And she called Secretary Raffensperger to say, we're seeing these kind
literally
of
a hothead.
Gabe thinks we need to say something about it. And the Secretary said yes, and that's what prompted me to do what I did. I lost my temper, but it seemed necessary at the time because it was just getting worse. And I could not tell you why that particular one was the one that put me over the edge, but it did.
Now, after you made this plea to the president, did Donald Trump urge his supporters to avoid the use of violence?
Not to my knowledge.
Now, as we know, the president was aware of your speech because he tweeted about it later that day. Let's take a look at what the president said. In the tweet, Donald Trump claims that there was, quote, massive voter fraud in Georgia. Mr. Sterling, that was just plain false, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
Nevertheless, the very next day, on December 2nd, President Trump released a lengthy video again making false claims of election fraud in Georgia. Let's take a look at what he said this time.
They found thousands and thousands
Honestly,
of
this
votes
guy makes more videos than we
that
do.
were out of whack.
Unbelievable.
All against me.
Yeah, everyone's against you, Don.
In fact, the day after Donald Trump released that video, so now we're talking just 2 days after the emotional warning that you gave that someone's going to get killed, representatives of President Trump appeared in Georgia, including Rudy Giuliani, and launched a new conspiracy theory that would take on a life of its own and threaten the lives of several innocent election workers. This story falsely alleges that sometime during election night, election workers at the State Farm Arena in Atlanta, Georgia, kicked out poll observers. After the observers left, the story goes, these workers pulled so-called suitcases of ballots from under a table and ran those ballots through counting machines multiple times. Completely without evidence, President Trump and his allies claimed that these suitcases contained as many as 18,000 ballots, all for Joe Biden. None of this was true. But Rudy Giuliani appeared before the Georgia State Senate and played a surveillance video from State Farm Arena, falsely claiming that it showed this conspiracy taking place. Here's a sample of what Mr. Giuliani had to say during that hearing.
Incredible, these guys.
And when you look at what you saw on the video, which to me was a smoking gun, powerful smoking gun, well, I don't have to be a genius to figure out what happened. And I don't have to be a genius to figure out that those votes are not legitimate votes. You don't put legitimate votes under a table.
No.
Wait until you throw the opposition out, and in the middle of the night, count them. We would have to be fools to think that.
President Trump's campaign amplified Giuliani's false testimony in a tweet, pushing out the video footage. Giuliani likewise pushed out his testimony on social media. As you can see in this tweet, Mr. Giuliani wrote that it was, quote, now beyond doubt, unquote, that Fulton County Democrats had stolen the election. Later in this hearing, we'll hear directly from one of the election workers in this video about the effect these lies had on her and on her family. Mr. Sterling, did the investigators in your office review the entire surveillance tape from the State Farm Arena on election night?
They actually reviewed approximately 48 hours going over the time period where action was taking place at the counting center at State Farm Arena.
And what did the tape actually show?
Depending on which time you want to start, because as was mentioned, this conspiracy theory took on a life of its own, where they conflated a water main break that wasn't a water main break and throwing observers out and a series of other things. What it actually showed was Fulton County election workers engaging in normal ballot processing. One of the things that was very frustrating was the so-called suitcases of ballots from under the table. If you watch the entirety of the video,
binders full of women.
You saw that these were election workers who were under the impression they were going to get to go home around 10:30. People are putting on their coats. They're putting ballots that are prepared to be scanned into ballot carriers that are then sealed with tamper-proof seals so that they're not messed with. It's an interesting thing because you watch there's 4 screens of the video, and as you're watching it, you can see the election monitors in the corner with the press as they're taking these ballot carriers and putting them under the table. You see it there. One of the other hidden ones, if you looked at the actual tape, was on the outside of the table, just from the camera angle. You couldn't see it originally. And this goes under the no good deed goes unpunished. We were told, we were at GEMA, as the secretary pointed out, and we were told that it looked like they were shutting down the Fulton County counting. The secretary expressed some displeasure at that because we wanted to everybody keep counting so we could get to the results and know what was happening. So our elections director called their elections director, who was at another location because this was election day. There was 2 different places where ballot things were being done by the Fulton County office. So he called the elections director of Fulton, then called Ralph Jones, who was at the State Farm Arena, and said, "What the heck are you doing? Go ahead and stay." And as you watch the video itself, you see him take the phone call as people are putting things away and getting ready to leave. And you can tell for about 15, 20 seconds, he does not want to tell these people they have to stay. He walks over, he thinks about it for a second, you see him come back to the corner of a desk and kind of slumps his shoulders and says, "Okay, y'all, we got to keep on counting." And then you see him take their coats off, get the ballots out, and then a secondary thing that you'll see on there is you'll have people who are counting ballots who a batch will go through, they will take them off and run that through again. What happens there is a standard operating procedure. If there is a misscan, if there's a misalignment, if it doesn't read right.
That's why you send them through twice.
Capacity scanners. So 3 or 4 will go through after a misscan. You have to delete that batch and put it back through again. And by going through the hand tally, as the secretary pointed out, we showed that if there had been multiple ballots scanned without a corresponding physical ballot, your counts would have been a lot higher than the ballots themselves. And by doing the hand tally, we saw 2 specific numbers that were met. The hand tally got us to a 0.1053% off of the total votes cast and 0.0099% on the margin, which is essentially dead-on accurate. Most academic studies say on a hand tally you'll have between 1% and 2%, but because we use ballot marking devices where it's very clear what the voter intended, it made it a lot easier for us to conduct that hand count and show that none of that was true.
Now, I understand
Again,
that
this is a Republican speaking.
When you reviewed these tapes and did the analysis, it disproved this conspiracy theory. But you still had to take a lot of steps to try to make sure the public knew the truth about these allegations. And you did frequent briefings for the press. Let's take a look at one of those press briefings, Mr. Sterling, that you held on December 7th to make the point that you just did today.
Move on to what I'm going to call Disinformation Monday. Out of the gate, many of y'all saw the videotape from State Farm Arena. I spent hours with our post-certified investigators, Justin Gray from WSB, spent hours with us going over this video to explain to people that what you saw, the secret suitcases with magic ballots, were actually ballots that had been packed into those absentee ballot carriers by the workers in plain view of the monitors and the press. And what's really frustrating is the president's attorneys
had this same videotape. They saw the exact same things the rest of us could see, and they chose to mislead state senators and the public about what was on that video. I'm quite sure that they will not characterize the video if they try to enter it into evidence, because that is the kind of thing that could lead to sanctions, because it's obviously untrue. They knew it was untrue, and they continue to do things like this.
Mr. Sterling, despite the efforts by your office to combat this misinformation by speaking out publicly and through local media, you were unable to match the reach of President Trump's platform and social media megaphone spreading these false conspiracy theories. What was it like to compete with a president who had the biggest bully pulpit in the world to push out these false claims?
For lack of a better word, it was frustrating, but oftentimes I felt
if he was more like the judge, he would take 9 seconds and come up with a better word.
People who needed to believe it because the President of the United States, whom many looked up to and respected, was telling them it wasn't true.
Yeah, like you, because you
Despite
voted
the
for him.
facts. And I have characterized at one point it was kind of like a shovel trying to empty the ocean. And yes, it was frustrating. I even have family members who I had to argue with about some of these things, and I would show them things. And
can you imagine? It's your profession, and you're arguing with your family members.
Well, they read about it on the internet.
An attorney that we know that we showed and walked him through.
They literally don't believe you.
This wasn't true. Okay, I get that. This wasn't 5 or 6 things. But at the end, he goes, I just know in my heart they cheated. That's just, and so once you get past the heart, the facts don't matter as much. And
like love.
Our job, from our point of view, is to get the facts out, do our job, tell the truth, follow the Constitution, follow the law, and defend the institutions. And the institutions held.
Let's take a look at what you were competing with. This is the former president speaking in Georgia on December 5th.
Don't phrase it as competing
The
with.
fraud is overwhelming, and again, I'm going to ask you to look up at that very, very powerful and very expensive screen.
Hidden cases of possible.
He's complaining about how much money they had to spend on the screen. That's what he was doing just
Under
there.
a cloud of suspicion.
So, if you just take the crime.
He's dogging someone for. I'm just going to talk over Trump every time they play him because we all know the guy's just, FOS. And he's complaining about the money that he's grifted off of people for the screen.
10 times more.
Yeah.
Because we lost.
Because they couldn't get somebody to donate it for free.
Yeah,
right?
and
This
because
committee's hearing last Monday, we heard from senior federal law enforcement officials, from the senior-most federal law enforcement official in Atlanta at the time, U.S. Attorney for the Northern District, B.J. Pack, as well as former Attorney General Bill Barr. They both testified that the allegations were thoroughly investigated and found to have no merit. Here is U.S. Attorney Pack.
Hit his back.
To go to Attorney General Barr, I told him that we looked into it. We've done several things, including interviewing the witnesses. I listened to the tapes and reviewed the videotape myself, and that there was nothing there. Giuliani was wrong in representing that this was a suitcase full of ballots.
And here's what Attorney General Bill Barr had to say about the same allegations.
Yeah, was that a relish hat?
Took a hard look at this ourselves, and based on our review of it, including the interviews of the key witnesses, the Fulton County allegations had no merit.
Boy, he just comes off as a blowhard, doesn't he?
Also have testimony from senior Department of
there's
Justice
nobody that wants to hear
officials
Bill Barr talk
establishing
more than Bill Barr
that
wants to hear Bill Barr
specifically
talk.
told President Trump that these allegations had been thoroughly investigated and were completely without merit. Here is Acting Deputy Attorney General. Allegations had been thoroughly investigated and were completely without merit. Here is Acting Deputy Attorney General Richard Donahue describing a phone conversation in which he specifically told President Trump that these allegations were false.
And kept fixating on this suitcase that supposedly had fraudulent ballots, and that the suitcase was rolled out from under the table. And I said, no, sir, there is no suitcase. You can watch that video over and over. There is no suitcase. There is a wheeled bin where they kept.
Boy, that's a tough edit.
Ballots. No matter how many times senior Department of Justice officials,
I've had bad edits.
including his own
Someone's
Attorney
just
General, told the
stomach just
President
flipped.
that these allegations were not true, President Trump kept promoting these lies and putting pressure on state officials to accept them. On January 2nd, the President had a lengthy telephone conversation with Secretary Raffensperger. Prior to the President's call, though, I want to share a bit of important context.
In which he broke the law.
The White House, including the former President's Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, repeatedly called or texted the Secretary's office some 18 times in order to set up this call. They were quite persistent. Second Chief of Staff Mark Meadows took the extraordinary step of showing up at a signature audit site in Georgia, where he met with Secretary Raffensperger's chief investigator, Francis Watson, who was supervising that audit process. Behind me is a photograph from that visit. Third, the day after Meadows' Georgia visit, he set up a call between President Trump and Francis Watson. On the call between President Trump and Georgia investigator Francis Watson, the former president continued to push the false claim that he'd won the state of Georgia. Let's listen to that part of the conversation.
You know, you have the most important job in the country right now, because if we win Georgia, first of all, if we win, you're going to have 2 wins. They're not going to win right now. You know, they're down because the people of Georgia are so angry at what happened to me. They know I won by hundreds of thousands of votes. It wasn't close.
And in this next clip, he told this state law enforcement official that she'd be praised.
Hundreds of thousands of votes.
The right answer.
I'll be friends with you.
Hopefully, you know, I will. When the right answer comes out, you'll be praised. I mean, I don't know why. You know, they've made it so hard. They will be praised. People will say, "Great," because that's what it's about. That ability to check and to make it right. Because everyone knows it's wrong. There's just no way.
Mr.
Trump is
Raffensperger, I
there
know you weren't on this
revealing
call,
what motivates
that you have
him,
listened
not
to
what
it.
motivates other people.
President Trump didn't win by
right.
hundreds of thousands of votes in Georgia, did he?
No, he did not. I've been traveling through the state of Georgia for a year now, and simply put, in a nutshell, what happened in fall of 2020 is that 28,000 Georgians skipped the presidential race, and yet they voted down ballot in other races. And the Republican congressmen ended up getting 33,000 more votes than President Trump. And that's why President Trump...
All of them were evangelicals, by the way.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
My friend
The President
who did that is.
on this call doesn't stop here. Let's listen to another part of the conversation between President Trump and Ms. Watson.
Anyway, but whatever you can do, Francis, it would be, it's a great thing. It's an important thing for the country. So important. You have no idea so important.
Don't call me Francis.
And I very much appreciate it.
Whatever you can do, Francis. This is the President of the United States calling an investigator looking into the election in which he is a candidate and asking her to do whatever you can do. Mr. Secretary, he placed this call to your chief investigator on September 23rd, 2020. The Select Committee has received text messages indicating that Mark Meadows wanted to send some of the investigators in her office, in the words of one White House aide, a shitload of POTUS stuff, including coins, actual autographed MAGA hats, etc. White House staff intervened to make sure that didn't happen. It was clear at the time of this call that the former president had his sights
Hashtag
set
that right
on
now.
January 6th.
Start that hashtag.
Listen to this portion when he told Francis Watson about a very important date.
Do you think they'll be working after Christmas to keep it going fast? Because, you know, we have that date of the 6th, which is a very important date.
That important date, of course, was the joint session of Congress, where Georgia's electoral votes would be counted for Joe Biden. A little over a week after this call to Francis Watson, the president was finally able to speak with you, Secretary Raffensperger. Bear in mind, as we discuss this call today, that by this point in time, early January, the election in Georgia had already been certified. But perhaps more important, the President of the United States had already been told repeatedly by his own top Justice Department officials that the claims he was about to make to you about massive fraud in Georgia were completely false. Mr. Secretary, the call between you and the President lasted 67 minutes, over an hour. We obviously can't listen to the entire recording here today, although it is available on the Select Committee's website. Well, we'll listen to selected excerpts of it now so that we can get your insights. Let's begin with the president raising the thoroughly debunked allegations of suitcases of ballots.
In an official voter box, they were in what looked to be suitcases or trunks, suitcases, but they weren't in voter boxes. The minimum number it could be, because we watched it and they watched it certified in slow motion, instant replay, if you can believe it, but had slow motion and it was magnified many times
There
over.
was not instant replay.
And the minimum it was 18,000 ballots, all for Biden.
These are the allegations that the Department of Justice, the Attorney General, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and your office had all said were false. Is that right?
Correct. And even more importantly, when B.J. Pack resigned as U.S. Attorney of the Northern District, President Trump appointed as acting U.S. Attorney of the Northern District Bobby Christine. And Bobby Christine looked at that, and he was quoted in the AJC that he found nothing. And he dismissed that case early also.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The president references suitcases
Bobby
or
Brown's
trunks.
daughter?
Mr. Sterling, were the objects seen in these videos suitcases or trunks, or were they just the ordinary containers that are used by election workers?
They're standard ballot carriers that allow for seals to be put on them so they're tamper-proof.
And finally, the president claims that there was a minimum of 18,000 ballots somehow smuggled in, all for Biden. I take it, gentlemen, that was also categorically false?
There's no physical way he can know who those ballots were for, but secondarily, Fulton County for years has been an issue in our state when it comes to elections. So they had a very difficult time during the primary, in large part because of COVID. So we had put them under a consent decree the secretary got negotiated, where we had a monitor on site. And his name is Carter Jones, and he took a notation. He had gone from State Farm to the English Street warehouse to look at election day activities, but before he left the State Farm Arena, he noted how many ballots had been counted on each one of the machines. And when he came back after we found out they were working again, he took note again when they closed. And I believe the final number was something around 8,900 total ballots were scanned from the time he left to the time about 12:30 or 1 o'clock in the morning. So way below 18,000.
Let's play the next clip.
I heard it was close. I said, there's no way. But they dropped a lot of votes in there late at night. You know that, Brad.
Mr. Secretary, did somebody drop
You
a
know
lot
that,
of votes
Brad.
there late at night?
No. I believe that the president was referring to some of the counties when they would upload, but the ballots had all been accepted and had to be accepted by state law by 7 p.m. So there were no additional ballots accepted after 7 p.m.
Let's play the next clip in which the president makes claims about so-called dead voters.
The other thing, dead people. So dead people voted, and I think the number is in the close to 5,000 people. And they went to obituaries. They went to all sorts of methods to come up with an accurate number. And
The same stuff, by the way, that he was saying in 2015, the same stuff he said about Iowa.
Mr. Secretary, did your office investigate whether those allegations were accurate? Did 5,000 dead people in Georgia vote?
No, it's not accurate. And actually, in their lawsuits, they alleged 10,315 dead people. We found 2 dead people when I wrote my letter to Congress that stated January 6th. And subsequent to that, we found 2 more. That's 1, 2, 3, 4 people, not 4,000, but just a total of 4, not 10,000, not 5,000.
1, 2.
Let's play the next
Who
clip.
did they vote for, too? I'd love to see it. I'd love to see who those dead people voted
There's nothing
for.
wrong with saying that, you know.
I'm Googling it. I'm Googling it right now.
You've recalculated because the 2,236 and absentee ballots, I mean, they're all exact numbers that were done by accounting firms, law firms, etc. And even if you cut them in half, cut them in half, and cut them in half again, it's more votes than we need.
Mr. Secretary, is there any way that you could have lawfully changed the result in the state of Georgia and somehow explained it away as a recalculation?
No, the numbers are the numbers. The numbers don't lie. We had many allegations, and we investigated every single one of them. In fact, I challenged my team, did we miss anything? They said that there was over 66,000 underage voters. We found that there's actually 0. You can register to vote in Georgia. When you're 17 and a half, you have to be 18 by election day. We checked that out, every single voter. They said that there was 2,423 non-registered voters. There were 0. They said that there was 2,056 felons. We identified less than 74 or less that were actually still in felony sentence. Every single allegation we checked, we ran down the rabbit trail to make sure that our numbers were accurate.
So there's no way you could have recalculated it except by fudging the numbers?
The numbers were the numbers, and we could not recalculate because we had made sure that we had checked every single allegation. And we had many investigations. We had nearly 300 from the 2020 election.
You see where he's going? He's about to
Mr.
say,
Secretary,
so if he
you're trying
wants
to
you to
push back
change the
when
number,
President
find
made
the
these
votes, it's because he
unsupported
wants you to
claims,
cheat.
whether they were about suitcases of ballots or that Biden votes were counted 3 times. Let's play the next clip.
President, they did not put that. We did an audit of that, and we proved conclusively that they were not scanned 3 times. Yeah, Mr. President, we'll send you the link from WSB that does.
I don't care about a link. I don't need it. I have a much better link.
You told the president you would send him a link from WSB, which I understand is a local television station that had a unedited video from the State Farm Arena. But the president wasn't interested in that. He said he had a much better link. Mr. Secretary,
hashtag
at the
I got a
time that
better
you were
link.
on the call with the president, as we have shown, both the FBI and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation have proven these claims to be nonsense. And you told him about these investigations on the phone. Let's listen to what President Trump had to say about the state and federal law enforcement officers who investigated these false claims.
There's no way they could find. Then they're incompetent. They're either dishonest or incompetent. Okay, there's only 2 answers: dishonesty or incompetence. There's just no way. Look, there's no way.
But the president didn't stop at insinuating that law enforcement officers were either dishonest or incompetent. He went on to suggest that you could be subject to criminal liability for your role in the matter.
Calling the kettle.
Before I play that portion of the conversation, I'd like to show you something that the president retweeted a couple weeks before your call with him. Here's the president retweeting a post from one of his allies, a lawyer who was later sanctioned by a judge in Michigan for making false claims of election fraud. Let's take a look at that tweet. The tweet read, quote, "President Trump, @real Donald Trump, is a genuinely good man. He does not really like to fire people. I bet he dislikes putting people in jail, especially, quote unquote, Republicans. He gave @Brian Kemp, Georgia, and @Georgia Secretary of State every chance to get it right. They refused. They will soon be going to jail." So on your call, this was not the first time the president was suggesting you might be criminally liable. With that, let's listen to this portion of the call.
I think you're going to find that they are shredding ballots because they have to get rid of the ballots because the ballots are unsigned. The ballots are corrupt. And they're brand new and they don't have seals and there's a whole thing with the ballots. But
He knows
the
nothing
ballots
about
are
any of
corrupt.
this.
And you're going to find that they are, which is totally illegal. It's more illegal for you than it is for them. Because you know
Trump
what
is
they did
talking
and you're
about
not
this stuff
reporting
to
it.
the
That's
Secretary of
that's
State
a
of Georgia, who knows
that's
the
a
ballots and the
criminal
law.
And you can't let that happen. That's a big risk
Come on,
to you and
Russell,
to Ryan.
don't
your lawyer.
speak
That's
back.
a big risk.
Secretary Raffensperger, after making a false claim about shredding of ballots, the president suggested that you may be committing a crime by not going along with his claims of election fraud.
Alex is right.
And after suggesting that you might have criminal exposure, President Trump makes his most explicit ask of the call. Let's play a part of that conversation.
So, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state.
Mr. Secretary, was the president here asking you for exactly what he wanted? One more vote than his opponent.
What I knew is that we didn't have any votes to find. We had continued to look. We investigated, like I just shared the numbers with you. There were no votes to find. That was an accurate count that had been certified. And as our general counsel said, there was no shredding of ballots.
Mr. Secretary, after making this request, the president then goes back to the danger of having you deny these allegations of fraud. Let's listen to that part of the clip.
And I watched you this morning, and you said, well, there was no criminality, but I mean, all of this stuff is very dangerous stuff. When you talk about no criminality, I think it's very dangerous for you to say that.
Secretary Raffensperger, you wrote about this in your book, and you said, quote, I felt then and still believe today that this was a threat. Others obviously thought so too, because some of Trump's more radical followers have responded as if it was their duty to carry out this threat. Please tell us what you, your wife, even your daughter-in-law experienced regarding threats from Trump's more radical followers.
Well, after the election, my email, my cell phone was doxxed, and so I was getting text all over the country, and then eventually my wife started getting the text, and hers typically came in as sexualized texts, which were disgusting. You have to understand that Trish and I, we met in high school, and we've been married over 40 years now, and so they started going after her, quit, walk away. And so that happened. And then some people broke into my daughter-in-law's home. And my son has passed, and she's a widow and has 2 kids. And so we're very concerned about her safety also.
And Mr. Secretary, why didn't you just quit and walk away?
Because I knew that we had followed it, walk away. And so that happened. And then some people broke into my daughter-in-law's home, and my son has passed, and she's a widow and has 2 kids, and so we're very concerned about her safety also.
And Mr. Secretary, why didn't you just quit and walk away?
Because I knew that we had followed the law and we had followed the Constitution, and I think sometimes moments require you to stand up and just take the shots when you're doing your job, and that's all we did. You know, we just followed the law and we followed the Constitution. And at the end of the day, President Trump came up short. But I had to be faithful to the Constitution. And that's what I swore an oath to do.
During the remainder of the call, the former president continued to press you to find the remaining votes that would ensure his victory in Georgia. Let's listen to a little more.
Why wouldn't you want to find the right answer, Brad, instead of keep saying that the numbers are right?
He's getting
Look,
angrier.
can you get together tomorrow? And Brad, we just want the truth. It's simple. And everyone's going to look very good if the truth comes out. It's okay. It takes a little while, but let the truth come out. And the real truth is I won by 400,000 votes, at least. So what are we going to do here, folks? I only need 11,000 votes. Fellas, I need 11,000 votes. Give me a break.
And what's crazy about it is, it doesn't win him anything if he wins Georgia. He still loses the presidency.
The president whipped up
Doesn't
the
need
crowd in front of the
11,000
ellipse,
anything
once
from
again
Georgia.
promoting the allegation that Secretary Raffensperger,
Just a born
President's
loser.
own Attorney General, had told him was false. Here he is on the ellipse.
In Fulton County, Republican poll watchers were ejected, in some cases
Blah,
physically,
blah.
from the
No,
room
they
under the
weren't.
false pretense
I'm heckling
of
him.
a pipe
I'm
burst.
heckling him on the
Watermain burst,
podcast live
everybody
stream.
leave, which we now know was a total lie. Then election officials pulled boxes, Democrats, and suitcases of ballots out from under a table. You all saw it on television, totally fraudulent, and illegally scanned them for nearly 2 hours, totally unsupervised. Tens of thousands of votes. This act coincided with a mysterious vote dump of up to 100,000 votes for Joe Biden, almost none for Trump. Oh, that sounds fair. That was at 1:34 a.m.
Mr. Secretary, Mr. Sterling, I want to thank you for your service to the state of Georgia and to the country. Speaker Bowers, likewise, I want to thank you for your service to the state of Arizona and to the country. You have served not only your home states, but our nation and our democracy. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Oh.
Thank you, Mr. Schiff.
Good job, Schiff.
I thank the witnesses for joining us today. You are now dismissed.
You are dismissed.
Boy.
Whew, that was abrupt.
Old Chairman Thompson just dissed those guys. Dismissed. Sup? How about that guy? Sup? You want to have an insurrection today? Sup? What's up with the president? What's up with the vice president?
Sup?
All right. Well, they're gonna.
Sup?
I think they're gonna
A
keep.
sitting senator is coming with fake lectures to. We're probably gonna get a preview of.
Well, they still
next
have.
Episode.
I think they still have the poll worker.
Oh goodness sakes!
The person who works the election polls, because poll worker can mean a lot of different things, depending on.
I don't know what you're referring to. Doug.
Well, some people go to these workout classes called bar classes and use polls often to get in a hearty
Is it
workout.
bar or barry?
It's bar. It's bar.
Is it? I honestly don't know.
Yeah. Well.
I drive by a place.
Yeah.
That,
It's
spelled Barre.
Yeah. But it's like secretary or attorney general bar. Could go bear, but it's bar. It's a bar class. But I don't think the next witness is a bar workout leader or a poll worker in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's going to rock the house.
Andrea Shea Moss. Ms. Moss worked in the Department of Registration and Elections in Fulton County, Georgia.
Oh, she's so nervous. Look
from
at her.
2017 until
I love her already.
2022.
You're doing it.
In that job, Ms. Moss handled voter applications and absentee ballot requests, and also helped to process vote count for several elections.
Love
In
her.
December 2020, Ms. Moss and her mother, Ms. Ruby Freeman, became the target of nasty lies spread by President Trump and his allies as they sought to overturn
allies.
the
The
election
way he says that
results in
sounds like
Georgia.
lies.
Ms. Moss and her mother, Ms. Freeman, are two of the unsung heroes in this
Well,
country,
let's sing it.
doing the hard work of keeping our democracy functioning for every American. Ms. Moss, welcome. Thank you for your service, and I thank you for being here today. I will now swear you in. Please stand.
Well, she's got a lot on her shoulders here. This is nobody wants to be here. She's a volunteer, wants to do the right thing and help democracy. Now she's being sworn into another Senate or House hearing.
I mean,
Nothing but the truth
is
will help you
her
God.
testimony going to be anything more than
Please be seated.
the MAGA Republicans were mean to me?
Yeah, it's going to be that they put her life at
Let the
risk,
record
which will connect
reflect
that
the
work
witness
to January
answered
6th.
in the
That's my
affirmative.
guess.
Ms. Moss, thank you very much for being here today. I understand that you are here along with your mother today. Would you like to introduce your mama?
Would you like to introduce your mama? How sweet is that?
Hi, Mom.
Love
Ms. Moss, today we'll be asking
Hi,
you
Ma.
about some
This
of the
guy.
threats that you received following the 2020 election.
Oh, Benny.
Since you've been an election worker for over 10 years, I want to ask you, in your decade of service, had you ever experienced threats like these before? Don't be nervous. Just,
Oh.
I understand.
Don't be
her nails
nervous.
are fantastic.
Don't be
and
nervous.
I want to make sure that
Who
the
tells
record
somebody that?
reflects that you've done it for quite a while and you never received a threat. And your answer was no. Thank you. Pursuant to Section 5C8 of the House
Somebody help her with
Resolution
her mute button.
503, the chair
Going the wrong
recognizes
way with
the
that mute button.
gentleman from California, Mr. Schiff, for questions.
Good afternoon, Ms. Moss. Thank you for being here. I understand that you were employed by the Fulton County Registration and Elections Department for more than 10 years, and I understand that you love that job. Please tell us what made you so fond of the work that you did.
Well, I've always been told by my grandmother how important it is to vote and how people before me, a lot of people, older people in my family did not have that right. So
Look at the person
what I
over
loved
her
most,
left shoulder.
about my
Just how
job were
eagerly
the older voters.
listening.
younger people could usually do everything
Wow.
from their phone or go online.
C-SPAN
but
star.
The older voters like to call, they like to talk to you, they like to get my card, they like to know that every election I'm here. And like even college students, a lot of parents trust in me to make sure their child does not have to drive home. They'll get an absentee ballot, they can vote, and I really found pleasure in that. I liked being the one that, you know, if someone can't navigate my voter page or, you know, they want a new precinct card and they don't have a copy machine or a computer or all of that, I could put it in the mail for them. I was excited always about sending out all the absentee ballots for the elderly, disabled people. I even remember driving to
loves
an
voting.
Hospital to give someone her absentee application. That's what I love the most.
Amazing.
You really enjoyed helping people vote and participate, and that was something, the right to vote that your grandmother taught you was precious.
Yes.
Well, I know the events that we're here to talk about today are incredibly difficult to relive. Your proud service as an election worker took a dramatic turn on the day that Rudy Giuliani publicized a video of you and your mother counting ballots on election night. President Trump, Rudy Giuliani, and others claimed on the basis of this video that you and your mother were somehow involved in a plot to kick out observers, bring suitcases of false ballots for Biden into the arena, and then run them through the machines multiple times. None of that was true, was it?
None of it.
I'd like to show you some of the statements that Rudy Giuliani made in a second hearing before the Georgia state legislators, a week after that video clip from State Farm Arena was first circulated by Mr. Giuliani and President Trump. I want to advise viewers that these statements are completely false and also deeply disturbing.
Tape earlier in the day of Ruby Freeman and Shay Freeman Moss and one other gentleman quite obviously surreptitiously passing around USB ports as if they're vials of heroin or cocaine. I mean, it's obvious to anyone who's a criminal investigator or prosecutor, they are engaged in surreptitious illegal activity again that day. And that's a week ago, and they're still walking around Georgia lying. They should have been questioned already. Their places of work, their homes should have been searched for evidence of ballots, for evidence of USB ports, for evidence of voter fraud.
USB ports. What's that?
Would they find a USB
That
port in
video
your
was
house?
from
though?
Rudy
Jump
Giuliani's
drives,
appearance at a
the
Georgia
port.
State Senate hearing on December 10. How did you become aware, how did you first become aware that Rudy Giuliani, the president's lawyer, was accusing you and your mother of a crime?
I was at work, like always, and
Just working hard.
the former chief, Mr. Jones, asked me to come to his office. And when I went to his office, the former director, Mr. Barron, was in there, and they showed me a video on their computer. It was just like a very short clip of us working at State Farm, and it had someone on the video like talking over the video, just saying that we were doing things that we weren't supposed to do, just lying throughout the video. And that's when I first found out about it.
And were there social media posts that they showed you responding to those false claims?
Well, when I saw the video, of course, the first thing that I said was like, why? Why are they doing this? What's going on? And they, just told me that Trump and his allies were not satisfied with the outcome of the election, and they were getting a lot of threats and being harassed online, and asked me, you know, have I been receiving anything, and I need to check on my mom. And I told them, I was like, where have they, you know, where have you been getting these threats? I don't believe I have any. And Mr. Jones told me, like, they're attacking his Facebook, and I don't really use Facebook. I have one, so I went to the Facebook app, and I'm just kind of panicky at this point because
Tried to remember my
never
password.
happened to me, and my mom is involved, and I'm like her only child. So I'm just asking him, like, well, where are the messages? All I see is the feeds. Like, how do you get to the messages? And he said, it's another icon on your phone that says Messenger. And I went to that icon, and
Oh no.
it was just a lot of horrible things there.
And those horrible things, did they include threats?
Yes, a lot of threats, wishing death upon me, telling me that, you know, I'll be in jail with my mother, and saying things like, be glad it's 2020 and not 1920.
Were a lot of these threats and vile comments racist in nature?
A lot of them were racist. A lot of them were just hateful. But yes, sir.
In one of the videos we just watched, Mr. Giuliani accused you and your mother of passing some sort of USB drive to each other. What was your mom actually handing you on that video?
A ginger mint.
It wasn't just Rudy Giuliani.
A ginger mint.
We heard President Trump make these false allegations repeatedly during his call with Secretary Raffensperger. Let's listen to a portion of what he had to say about you and your mother.
We had
Blah, blah, blah.
at least 18,000, that's on tape. We had them counted very painstakingly, 18,000 voters having to do with Ruby Freeman. She's a vote scammer, a professional vote scammer and hustler.
Donald Trump
She's
attacked
rubber,
you,
you're
mother,
glue.
using her name 18 times on that call. 18 times. Ms. Moss, can you describe what you experienced listening to former President Trump attack you and your mother in a call with the Georgia Secretary of State?
I felt horrible. I felt like it was all my fault. Like, if I would have never decided to be an elections worker, like, I could have done anything else, but that's what I decided to do. And now people are lying and spreading rumors and lies and attacking my mom. I'm her only child. Going to my grandmother's house. I'm her only grandchild. And my kid. It's just, I felt so bad. I just felt bad for my mom, and I felt horrible for picking this job and being the one that always wants to help and always there.
Oh.
Never
Enneagram
missing out one election. I just felt like it was
Just trying to help.
for putting my family in this situation.
Wow.
Well, it wasn't your fault. Your mother was kind enough to come speak with us earlier. Let's listen to her story in her words.
My name is Ruby Freeman.
Classy
I've always
woman.
believed that when God says that he'll make your name great, but this is not the way it was supposed to be.
Those glasses.
I could have never imagined the events that followed the presidential election 2020. For my entire professional life, I was Lady Ruby. My community in Georgia, where I was born and lived my whole life, knew me as Lady Ruby. I built my own business around that name, La Ruby's Unique Treasures, a pop-up shop catering to ladies with unique fashions. I wore a shirt that proudly proclaimed that I was, and I am, Lady Ruby.
I'm changing my Facebook to I am
Actually,
Lady
had
Ruby.
that shirt on.
Sell it out.
I had that shirt in every color. I wore that shirt on Election Day 2020. I haven't worn it since, and I'll never wear it again. Now I won't even introduce myself by my name anymore. I get nervous when I bump into someone I know in the grocery store who says my name. I'm worried about who's listening. I get nervous when I have to give my name for food orders. I'm always concerned of who's around me. I've lost my name, and I've lost my reputation. I've lost my sense of security, all because a group of people, starting with number 45 and his ally, Rudy Giuliani, decided to scapegoat me and my daughter, Shay, to push their own lies about how the presidential election was stolen.
Wow. Wow.
Ms. Moss, how has this
Amazing.
experience of being targeted by the former president and his allies affected your life?
It's turned my life upside down. I no longer give out my business card. I don't transfer calls. I don't want anyone knowing my name. I don't want to go anywhere with my mom because she might yell my name out over the grocery aisle or something. I don't go to the grocery store at all. I haven't been anywhere at all. I've gained about 60 pounds. I just don't do nothing anymore. I don't want to go anywhere. I second guess everything that I do. It's affecting my life in a major way. In every way.
Donald Trump is a horrible person.
All because of lies. For me doing my job, same thing I've been doing forever.
Your mother also told the select committee about how she had to leave her own home for her safety and go into hiding after the FBI told her that it would not be safe for her there before January 6th and until the inauguration. Let's listen to a clip of her story in her own words.
Around the week of January 6th, the FBI informed me that I needed to leave my home for safety. And I left my home for safety around that time.
Understood. How long did you stay out? Did you, remain outside of your home for your own safety?
I stayed away from my home for approximately 2 months.
Oh.
It was horrible. I felt homeless. I felt, I can't believe this person has caused this much damage to me and my family. To have to leave my home, that I've lived there for 21 years.
Do you remember, was there a specific threat that prompted that, or was it the accumulation of threats that you had received?
What prompted it was getting ready to, January 6th was about to come. And they did not want me to be at home because of all the threats and everything that I had gotten. They didn't want me to be there in fear of, the people were coming to my home, and I had a lot of that. So they didn't want me to be there just in case something happened. I asked, how long am I going to have to be at home? And they said, at least until the inauguration.
Moss, I understand that people once showed up at your grandmother's house. Tell us about that experience.
I received a call from my grandmother. This woman is my everything. I've never even heard her or seen her cry ever in my life. And
I like her already.
She called me screaming at the top of her lungs, like, Shay, oh my God, Shay, just freaking me out, saying that there were people at her home, and they, they knocked on the door, and of course she opened it and seeing who was there, who it was, and they just started pushing their way through, claiming that they were coming in to make a citizen's arrest. They needed to find me and my mom. They knew we were there.
How long do you think that guy's beard is? Beard, you know, the guy.
She was just screaming and didn't know what to do, and I wasn't there, so, you know, I just felt so helpless and so horrible for her, and she was just screaming. I told her to close the door. Don't open the door for anyone. And, you know, she's a 70-something, I won't say, year-old woman, and she doesn't like having restrictions. She wants to answer the door. She likes to get her steps in, walking around the neighborhood, and I had to tell her, like, you can't do that. You have to be safe. You know, she would tell me that at night, people would just continuously send pizzas over and over to her home, you know, and they were expecting her to pay for these large amounts of pizzas, and she went through a lot that she didn't have to. And once again, it made me just feel so horrible.
In addition to the personal impact this experience has had on you and your family, one of the things that I find most disturbing is how these lies discourage longtime election workers from continuing to do this important work. Tell us, if you would, of the other election workers shown in that State Farm Arena video and their supervisors. How many are still election workers in Fulton County?
There is no permanent election worker or supervisor in that video that's still there.
And did you end up leaving your position as well?
Yes, I left.
Ms. Moss, I want to thank you for coming in to speak with us and to thank you for your service to our democracy. What we have just played is a truly horrible and appalling sample, but just a sample of the things that were said about you and your mother following the election. I want to say how very sorry I think we all are for what you've gone through, and tragically, you're not alone. Other election workers around the country have also been the subject of lies and threats. No election worker should be subject to such heinous treatment just for doing their job. With your permission, I would like to give your mother the last word.
Yes.
We're just going to play the tape.
There is nowhere I feel safe. Nowhere. Do you know how it feels to have the President of the United States to target you? The President of the United States is supposed to represent every American, not to target one. Yeah. But he targeted me, Lady Ruby, a small business owner, a mother, a proud American citizen who stand up to help Fulton County run an election in the middle of the pandemic.
Thank you, Ms. Moss. Thank you, Ms.
Incredible.
Or as America now knows her, Lady Ruby, for your service to Fulton County,
Lady
Georgia,
Ruby.
our country, and our democracy. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Schiff. Ms. Moss,
Yes, sir.
I want to thank you for sharing with us the very troubling story of what you and your mother experienced. The harassment of election workers like you simply for doing your duty as public servants poses a threat to our democratic process. Your testimony is an important contribution to the work of our committee and serves as a reminder to all of us that the safety of local election officials is vital to ensuring that our elections are always free and fair. I want to thank our witness for joining us today. The members of the Select Committee may have additional questions for today's witness, and we ask that you respond expeditiously in writing to those questions. Without objection, members will be permitted 10 business days to submit statements for the record. including opening remarks and additional questions for the witness.
It's like the user agreement
Without
at the end of every
objection,
one of these.
Chair
You check the box.
recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Schiff, for a closing statement.
For more than 200 years, our democracy has been distinguished by the peaceful transfer of power. When an American raises their right hand and takes the presidential oath of office, they are transformed from an ordinary citizen into the most powerful person in the world, the president. This is an awesome power to acquire. It is even more awesome when it is handed on peacefully. When George Washington relinquished the office of the presidency, it set a precedent that served as a beacon for other nations struggling against tyranny. When Ronald Reagan described it as a kind of miracle in the eyes of the world, he was exactly right. Other countries use violence to seize and hold power, but not in the United States, not in America. When Donald Trump used the power of the presidency to try to stay in office after losing the election to Joe Biden, he broke that sacred and centuries-old covenant. Whether his actions were criminal will ultimately be for others to decide. But what he did was, without a doubt, unconstitutional. It was unpatriotic, and it was fundamentally un-American. And when he used the power of his presidency to put the enormous pressure on state, local, and local elections officials and his own vice president, it became downright dangerous. On January 6th, that pressure became deadly. Ruby Freeman said the president is supposed to protect every American, not target them.
Wow.
And she is right. If the most powerful person in the world can bring the full weight of the presidency down on an ordinary citizen who is merely doing her job with a lie as big and heavy as a mountain, who among us is safe? None of us is. None of us. In city councils and town councils, on school boards and election boards, from the Congress to the courts, dedicated public servants are leaving their posts because of death threats to them and to their families. This is not who we are. It must not become who we are. Our democracy held because courageous people like those you heard from today put their oath to the Constitution above their loyalty to one man or to one party. The system held, but barely, and the question remains, will it hold again? If we are able to communicate anything during these hearings, I hope it is this. We have been blessed beyond measure to live in the world's greatest democracy. That is a legacy to be proud of and to cherish, but it is not one to be taken for granted. That we have lived in a democracy for more than 200 years does not mean we shall do so tomorrow. We must reject violence. We must embrace our Constitution with the reverence it deserves, take our oath of office and duties as citizens seriously, informed by the knowledge of right and wrong, and armed with no more than the power of our ideas and the truth, carry on this venerable experiment in self-governance. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Without objection, the chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Wyoming, Ms. Cheney, for a closing statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Lady Ruby and Shay, thank you for your courage. Thank you for your strength. Thank you for being here today. It means so much.
Next time on the committee hearing.
So thank you for that. We have had tremendous testimony today. We've been reminded that we're a nation of laws. And we've been reminded by you and by Speaker Bowers and Secretary of State Raffensperger and Mr. Sterling that our institutions don't defend themselves. Individuals do that. And we've reminded that it takes public servants. It takes people who've made a commitment to our system to defend our system. We also have been reminded what it means to take an oath under God to the Constitution. What it means to defend the Constitution.
Divinely inspired by
and
some
we were
people's
reminded by
imagination.
Speaker Bowers that our Constitution is indeed a divinely inspired document. And so it's been an honor to spend time with you and with our previous witnesses here today. To date, more than 30 witnesses called before this committee have not done what you've done. but have invoked their Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination.
Wow, 30.
Roger Stone took the Fifth, General Michael Flynn took the Fifth, John Eastman took the Fifth. Others, like Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro, simply refused to comply with lawful subpoenas, and they have been indicted. Mark Meadows has hidden behind President Trump's claims of executive privilege and immunity from subpoenas. We're engaged now in litigation with Mr. Meadows. The American people in our hearings have heard from Bill Barr, Jeff Rosen, Richard Donahue, and many others who stood up and did what is right.
Oh, did Bill Barr stand up?
Soon.
Did Bill Barr do what was
The
right?
American people have not yet heard from Mr. Trump's former White House counsel, Pat Cipollone. Our committee is certain that Donald Trump does not want Mr. Cipollone to testify here. Indeed, our evidence shows that Mr. Cipollone and his office tried to do what was right. They tried to stop a number of President Trump's plans for January 6th. Today, and in our coming hearings, you will hear testimony from other Trump White House staff explaining what Mr. Cipollone said and did, including on January 6th. But we think the American people deserve to hear from Mr. Cipollone personally. He should appear before this committee, and we are working to secure his testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Wow, just using my closing statement to call out Cipollone.
In such different ways.
That's no baloney.
Some run for office. Some volunteer to make sure their neighbors can get to their voting locations. Some work at polling sites to help election day go smoothly. Some look into problems to guarantee our elections are secure and accurate, just to name a few. As I mentioned at the start of this hearing, when we talk about our democratic institutions, we're talking about these individuals and many others who do these jobs across the country. They represent the backbone of our democracy at its most important moments, when the citizens cast their votes and when those votes are counted. We've heard the stories of their courage. They've earned the thanks of a grateful nation. But for Donald Trump, these witnesses and others like them were another roadblock to his attempt to cling to power. On Thursday, we'll hear about another part of that scheme, his attempt to corrupt the country's top law enforcement body, the Justice Department, to support his attempt to overturn the election. Just as we heard today that Donald Trump was deeply involved in a scheme to pressure state officials to overturn the election results, we will hear on Thursday that Donald Trump was also the driving force behind the effort to corrupt the Justice Department. Listen to this clip from the former acting Attorney General, Richard Donahue.
The president said, suppose I do this, suppose I replace him, Jeff Rosen, with him, Jeff Clark. What do you do? And I said, sir, I would resign immediately. There is no way I'm serving 1 minute under this guy, Jeff Clark.
You'll hear from Mr. Donahue in person on Thursday as my colleague, Mr. Kinzinger, presents details about this plan. The chair requests those in the hearing room remain seated until the Capitol Police have escorted members from the room. Without objection, the committee stands adjourned.
Well, there we go, Rob.
Yeah. All right. So, I mean, I think people are going to remember Lady Ruby and her daughter as kind of, heroes in this hearing. I think it's just important for us to underscore who the villains are. There were two that were named that are pretty significant. I mean, beyond Donald Trump and his lawyers and all of that. In going back to the earlier testimony regarding the fake electors, there were two people mentioned. One was Congressman Andy Biggs from Arizona, who suggested to Rusty that he could change the results of the election. A sitting congressman pressuring another elected official to do that. The other villain, and it's important to mention this, is Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, who was more than willing to carry the documents produced by the fake electors, the forgeries of federal documents created by the fake electors, to the vice president and deliver them to him. What we have here is two elected officials in Washington, D.C., a congressman and a senator, participating in an attempted coup.
Totally.
Not just talking about it, not just political rhetoric, hoping their guy won.
Not just like let's run it through the laws. They took these fake electors that they knew were fake and tried to jam them into the legal apparatus of the certification of the electors.
Yep.
Incredible.
Ron Johnson.
Think about that.
Ron Johnson and Andy Biggs
need
to resign today.
Today. This guy has got to go. Let's bring it back. Ron John's got to go.
Yeah.
Because you could make an argument up until January 6th that there's a legal process, you have to follow legal. Once you're pushing for fake electors, well beyond like, well, we just need these in case the court is going to.
Yeah.
No, I'm
Talk
with
about
you.
2,000 mules. We've got a mule willing to carry forged documents to the vice president.
And then the vice president's,
senator.
sup man handler is like, do not approach the vice president with those papers. Keep your dirty little papers out of his paws. Yeah. Which also just tells you how much the staff does on all this stuff. These people all have staff around them. Hey, I just want to, look, we should be cheering on Lady Ruby and Shay. They were incredible. Yes. Yeah, I sort of wondered, like you did, what more are they going to say? I thought they were going to try to connect it to the violence, but boy, as it turns out, just a riveting story of their own personal pain brought about by Donald Trump's choices. The things Donald Trump said about this election, he was saying before the election. He was naming Philadelphia. He was naming Georgia. He was saying this stuff. He was saying, I don't know that I'm going to abide by the election results. And yet, two of the members of this committee voted for him and said he would be a better president than Joe Biden. I cannot let go of the fact, not in 2016, but in 2020, knowing everything he had done and said, we all knew what was going to happen. That Trump was going to deny the validity of the election. He was calling it a fraud. They still said he would be better as president, saying that our elections are fraudulent, than Joe Biden being the president. I still just feel like Adam Kinzinger and Representative Cheney have to explain why they thought in November that he was a reasonable person to continue as the president, and then their judgment clarified. Because their judgment is so bad. Honestly, I wouldn't trust these people with caring for my animals if they have this level of judgment about a president. And they're professional politicians. So this is where it makes me enraged, because it was all of those people that gave Donald Trump all of this power to hurt people like Shay Moss and Lady Ruby. So for these folks to sit there and act like, well, now the great heroes like Bill Barr that stepped up and did the right. No, they didn't. And you voted for him, and you shouldn't be bringing up who were the heroes in front of Shay Moss and Lady Ruby. Yes. Zip it. Because you couldn't bring yourself to think that maybe just once a person that you have known for decades would be a reasonable president simply because he's in another party. You were willing to give us Donald Trump, the guy who did this. You were willing to give us Donald Trump again because you couldn't get over your own party commitment. And now you sit here and act like the pain is going to be upon all of you and your shame you will not chase away. Your shame for believing that you couldn't pick anyone else but a Republican because, you know, I'm a Republican. I have to. Really? You thought this guy that then months later continued doing the things he had done earlier to this level of pain, leading to the insurrection. I mean, it's one thing for just your average voter or whatever. Maybe somebody gets, but when you're a professional on the inside of all of it, the way the way Adam Kissinger, I was about to say Kissinger, Adam Kinzinger, and real zinger, Kissinger, and Representative Cheney, the way they posture themselves, we're now the ones doing the right thing, and just no, not a moment.
Yep. You're exactly right.
I've been getting more and more irritated about this as time goes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because this is the stuff that happens. These are the people that get hurt all around. Our democracy, look at where we're spending a beautiful, longest sunny day of the year having to watch this to be litigated because people, including you, voted for the guy again.
Yep.
And said to yourselves, he would be better than Joe Biden.
Yep.
You almost wonder if they would have, even with all this, would you still vote for him again? Are you still willing to still do it? I mean, I don't know. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. It's just you had one chance, and you said the election validity denying guy is your guy.
Yep.
The shame will not wash off.
Yep. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, it's nice to
Listen,
see that Joe pop up on the bottom there.
There
Look at
he
that.
is. Yeah. Hey, I just so appreciate the folks who've been watching along with us.
Oh, man.
Hopefully you're you're enjoying this as much as we are. It's so
not possible.
These are like critical events in the history of our democracy, and it's great that we've got folks that are participating with us.
So thank you, Alex, Jim, Vanessa, Corey. Where else am I going? Corey,
Shell.
Good one. Yeah, boy, lots of comments in there.
Wendy.
Shelley. Yeah, Wendy. Thanks to all of you. I'm going to do the best I can to be on this on Thursday. Rob, we've got to talk about this. I have to be in New York at some meetings, and I'm not sure how we're going to do this on Wednesday. So
We're on Thursday.
Thank you, Thursday.
Yeah, I've got
We'll
got a
talk.
therapy appointment that goes right to 2:00, and we're supposed to start at 2:00. So
yeah, and I'm not sure how we're going to do that. So
yeah,
okay,
but we'll figure it out.
Keep posted or go to C-SPAN yourself and watch it.
Nah, we got to do this. We got to do it somehow. We'll figure it out.
Okay.
It's
tougher than one might think if you don't have multiple streams and computers, and it's really complicated. How do you to make this stuff work? All right. Thanks, everybody. 2 hours and 49 minutes, or 2 hours and 47 minutes of this, and with an hour this morning, and tomorrow on the podcast and live stream right here, if all things go right, talking with Brian McLaren, activist and turtle rancher. So join us for that.
Please go ahead and smash that subscribe button before you click away.
Bang that thing. Pop it. All right. Bye.